can join. I mean, I invite you first to join the SEMIC community on the Interoperability portal. You can also join the GitHub community we have, where you can also open issue, make comments on the specification to propose change. And I mean, on the Join Up community, we'll have access to also to what we do, the pilot, the study, the knowledge hub, and the toolkit. And thank you. This is our things. If you have any, do we take questions now or at the end? Or?
We have a question from I don't know if it's from the audience or from the from online.
Yeah, I guess it's not for me because it's a question for other data space, as I understood.
Yes, it looks like more like a question for the health data spaces. So we're going to have a look at it afterwards. Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you very much, George. And it's now time for. It looks like the speakers will have to hook up with a microphone. We were not prepared for this. We thought we had a hand-handled microphone. So I'll encourage, well, George is afterwards, so it's okay. But I will call the speakers on the side so they can get ready. The next one is Alexander Kotsev. So Alexander is a team leader at the European Commission Joint Research Center. Has been working at the JRC for the past 12 years, focusing on data-driven innovation, semantics, data standards, architectures, and digital sovereignty. Today, he will speak about the JRC support around data spaces ecosystem. Please welcome Alexander Kotsev.
Often generate new data. What we have is made available through our own JRC Open Data Catalog, documented with a different level of detail of the metadata, and usually combined with publications. So we have the publications that use the data and describe it, and also the actual data exposed. And something that goes hand in hand with the JRC data catalog are our fair data guidelines, because clearly in this audience here at the SEMIC conference, it makes no sense to describe what fair data is. But if we want to be very concrete about how to be fair with our data, it is sometimes a little bit unclear, right? Fair is a very nice concept, very well understood and known, but how to get there, how to be fairer in a way, is not so trivial. So what we have is this fair data guidelines, which actually define different levels of fairness and provide very concrete examples from the JRC data catalog on data which fits within one of the different levels. The idea here is that anyone who wants to expose data within the JRC can draw inspiration from there and actually copy and replicate examples that are included in the guidelines. This can be easily reused in other contexts, so anyone having to do something with fair data, and there's a lot of colleagues here dealing with those kind of topics, I would encourage to take a look at that. This guideline has made it also to the model contractual terms for business-to-business government that were made available by the package that was released by the Commission last week, the digital omnibus, the simplification, the new European Data Union strategy, and there is also one part of the package that includes references and examples from this guideline. Moving on then, we have been quite active in the past years, also in close collaboration with SEMIC, but also with the member states in geospatial data sharing, where our group is technical coordinator for the INSPIRE directive for the Commission, and we do a lot with metadata there, a lot of activities with interoperability, APIs, specifications, etc. Just a few examples. One example in particular here, we have this pilot where the data ideally and then without losing any of the information. This is done together with SEMIC, but also we have 9 participating member states in this exercise, and some of them are actually here with us today, and I use the opportunity to thank them for the collaboration. Moving on then, in terms of governance of semantic and technical assets, we have quite a healthy community in Inspire, and we actually, all the different technical specifications, semantic models, technical guidelines, the documents are made available in the public domain. Git repositories, we have devised those processes together with the community for governing, for change management, and for updating those in a consensus. There is a voting procedure there and a very, very clear and straightforward pipeline to be followed. So anyone interested in learning more, please get in touch. Some learnings from Inspire as well, and going beyond, really looking into the interoperability approaches for environmental data sharing that will be presented a little bit later during the agenda as part of the SAGE project presentations that we did in collaboration. AI is something, as mentioned, that we're increasingly interested in looking into. Something that is presented now, I think, for the first time, a very early prototype that we created. Literally, the first working prototype was out last week. We have this metadata editor, AI-assisted metadata editor. The example here is with GeoDCAT. But any of the other dialects of DCAT, as George mentioned, DCAT has become the de facto standard now for the different data spaces with all the application profiles and the extensions. But we still have the problem that very often people do not feel as much metadata as we would want to see available and created. So AI-assisted metadata, basically what this does is one uploads a data set, in this case a geospatial data set. The user chooses the schema, that is GeoDCAT, and then uploads some other material. Could be an academic, could be a scientific publication, could be a report, could be whatever that contains information that can be extracted and populated within the different metadata fields. Then there is, of course, a user agency. The user takes a look at the end result, validates the content of each of the fields, and voila, the end result is metadata created with less effort from the human. Credits here to my colleague Margherita Di Leo for creating this prototype. Happy to demo it outside. Then something else, the catalog I already described. We are working with in-house large language models, so we have quite a lot of open source models deployed in-house in our own infrastructures, as well as all the different proprietary models like the OpenAI, ChatGPT, Mistral, etc. But this allows us to really experiment a lot with the use of large language models for semantics and also for giving, improving the discoverability of data. So what you see here is on the slide is a chatbot where we actually took the content of the catalog and then we created a layer that uses those in-house models, the GPT at JRC, and actually gives another perspective of the data where all the users can actually interact. They can ask questions, and then, of course, everything goes through the LLM, but then in the end result, it's a better way, multiple languages, multiple ways of interacting and finding the actual data. In this example here, the interface, the question of the user is what is there in the catalog on air quality, and then the response is the list, and then the users can continue to be digging deeper and deeper. Moving on then, flipping the coin. So no, not AI for data, but data for AI. Of course, AI-ready data is something that I think we're going to hear quite a lot during the workshops today and the conference tomorrow. We do experiment quite a lot with synthetic data. So very often, so it happens that there is no actual real raw data made available for certain reasons, doesn't exist, falls under confidentiality limitations. So we experiment with generating data, again, very often through the use of large language models that can complement or in some cases substitute existing data. Something that also features heavily in the European Data Union strategy. And a final thing to mention, final example, privacy preservation. We have a large chunk of activities, again, in an experimental setup where we look into different technologies that can help us use data without compromising privacy. So there is a whole set of techniques, federated learning, which is about visiting the data as opposed to sharing it, operating on encrypted data sets, introducing noise, different techniques where we actually can still make use of the data for training AI, but without having any problems with privacy and security. We have been evaluating maturity levels of these technologies, device strategies, trade-offs between the different models, and we have a fairly good overview of what works and what doesn't, and in what specific conditions. So come talk to us on those kind of topics. And with that, I thank you for the attention, and apologies once again for the issues in the beginning. Thanks a lot.
Any question, maybe? I have a question, Alexander. Let me put this one. Here is for the question. And is there any question from the audience first? Yes, sorry. First, the gentleman on the audience.
Yes, thanks a lot for the question. So there was no microphone set, so let me repeat the question for the recording. The question is, how do we use large language models for generating personas? So the way in which this works is, first maybe to mention, we have the personas generated already by using microdata. So there is microdata from census. We take this, we generate some personas like following the statistical distribution of the data. And then what we do is, so we know that there is a synthetic person, for instance, with within a certain age group, with a gender, with a certain educational background, etc. So typical thing that a statistical office usually deals with. And then what we can do with this information is we can instantiate those personas by using the LLM. So basically, all of this information is fed through to the large language model, and this is like the instruction actually. Please generate a person who is with that age, and then we start actually interrogating those personas, and they actually we managed to capture also the learnings from that exercise. So we have a few policy briefs, a few articles published on the topic. Happy to continue the discussion after if you would be interested to know more.
We found the mic, so if there is any other question. Yes.
Good morning. So my question, maybe it's a following question to your comment. When you generate synthetic data, there is the need to evaluate the quality, the basis of a synthetic data. Are you working on this aspect at the GRC?
Yes, that's a very good question. Thanks for that. So indeed, the big question, we can generate it. There's no problem to generate. Of course, technology allows it. It scales. It's computationally costly, but we can do. The way in which this is to be done, and there is a new project now in the pipeline, is to actually generate synthetic data for populations that are also known. So we actually, if there is the microdata, this is used in order to validate. So this is something seriously considered and in a way in the pipeline already, yes.
Just a follow-up.
I just wanted to say that this data can be used as synthetic proxy data. So you can make this data more easy in a more easy way accessible in the data spaces. So the synthetic data generation is currently a hot topic, especially for all sensitive data. So these technologies, they are important, for instance, to fine-tune some LLMs for, I don't know, medical devices, for instance. But the quality of this data is key. So that was my question. Are you working on validating this synthetic data so that we can really rely on it in the data spaces? Thank you.
Yes, so no, indeed, this is the big problem, validation, because they're very easy to generate, but then one can draw wrong assumptions if they are not representative for anything but themselves. So indeed, there is no silver bullet here, I think. We're investigating in particular for population, but of course what would work for population, what I mentioned, you have basically the raw data, and then you compare with what you generate in the synthetic, and then you see if there is a similarity there. Of course, this would not work for other kinds of synthetic data, like medical devices that you mentioned. That would need other methods and approaches. But fully with you, this is the huge topic to be disentangled. If we manage to do that, then I think a lot of the data and availability in data spaces will improve quite substantially.
Thank you very much, Alexander. Thank you. Let's move on, as the time is of essence. So the next one is about the data union strategy. So we had a problem, as in our colleague from the DG Connect couldn't attend today. So presenting the slide will be George George Lobo from DG Connect, DG Digit, sorry. You already know George. So George, the floor is yours.
So we will save some minutes because I don't need to introduce myself. So about the role of data. So I mean, as you know, I mean, on the 19th of November, the Commission put out a proposal for the data union. I mean, the communication on data union strategy, as well as the proposal for the omnibus. So pardon me if I would not be able to answer precise questions. So I'm just reporting. Unfortunately, the colleagues in charge could not be here. So I mean, this revision was driven by many things. I mean, AI is there, but I mean, to have good AI, you need to have good data. I mean, if you have crap data, you will get crap out of it. So that's the important thing. So we need large volume, and we produce. I mean, the EU produce a lot of high quality data. And of course, if we don't have access to this data, if this data is not accessible to companies, to developers, for people who are also creating these AI models across a different sector, we will miss out the productivity and growth we could win out of this. So the data union strategy focus from rules to results. So it's to create more value for AI and innovation and enabling data to be shared. So the data union strategy is divided in 3 pillars. So first, it's to scale up the access to high quality data, and this is, I mean, to improve greater data sharing. Also, the other pillar, and this is where the omnibus is, to have the omnibus is a regulation to simplify, because as you know, there have been a number of acts since many years around data, and the idea, I mean, we can understand from the, I mean, from the public sector perspective, from the private sector perspective, it becomes complicated to comply with this regulatory landscape. So there will be also supporting companies to comply with the Data Act. And also to adopt, I mean, this is the thing, I mean, we know in which context we are now globally, so it's to have an open but assertive approach to international data flows. So it's to attract more flows, but also safeguarding EU data's interest, so not that we give all the data for nothing. So on the data union strategy, so I mean, as what was mentioned, I mean, it's to continue the deployment of the common European data spaces for sharing data built on cloud infrastructure, and also to define the rules, and this is where most of the people are working on, to define the rules and of access, with the help of, but we'll see later, with some middleware we are also developing. And so the idea is to scale up, to have more people in the data space, to have more actors sharing data space, but also using that, to also focus on area of public interest. And there will be a new data space, which was not here. It's, as you know, it's European Defense Data Space. Also, there will be also new public sector high-value data sets. As you know, there was the Open Data Directive that defines a number of high-value data sets that should be shared by the public sector. And here is to develop this, and in particular to put a focus, because in Europe we have this particularity compared to other continents where we have a high number of languages, some of them that are less small, speaking by a limited number of people, but I mean, it's not that we ask people to change language, so it's also to improve language data, to have more language data, to get more sources, to be more efficient also in treating this multilingual landscape we live in. And the other part would be also to develop data labs. So this is also something that is start. So really to start to link data space, to make experiments, to try to see how we could get more value out of different data space coming from different domains. And we have the horizontal enablers, so it's also, I mean, the production of synthetic data, enabling data pooling, and also developing new standards on data quality and data labeling, because it's not the only thing is to share the data, is to ensure the data means something, and it's really important. So now coming to pillar 2, so it's streamlining databus, the omnibus, so it's streamlining the data rules. So the idea would be the merging, and this is, I will come, is to do the merging of all the data related to 4 regulation into one. So the Data Act will become the main regulation, and it will encompass, and I will come to this later, the 4 regulation. There will be also a digital fitness check, so it's to check that, I mean, with the EU data acquis, to review and streamline the EU data acquis. There will be a data protection review, so still maintaining GDPR as the core, but improving the enforcement and the consistency. And as well, there will be a support package for the Data Act, because the Data Act will be there, but also mostly focusing on compliance for SMEs, because we know that compliance is sometimes difficult for small company. And there will be also guidance, so these are the next steps on compensation, trade secrets, and other aspects that are more here. And as well to develop a sort of one-click compliance, so to avoid duplication, so to identify where we have double reporting and fragmented oversight. Also in Digit, we're working around that. We build a vocabulary for reporting, and also to try to automate compliance to one-click verification. And one of the enablers for that will be, for example, the business wallet that has been proposed now, where you would be able to make this compliancy. The pillar 3, so this is more about the EU data sovereignty. I mean, sovereignty is has a different aspect. There is also the aspect of data, not only about software, and it's to promote openness with trusted partners, but ensuring that data is securely and exchanged into fair conditions. And also, I mean, we live in the world we live today, so it's to have rules for exchanging to ensure from and to Europe more secure data flows. So the outlines, this is the digital omnibus. So here the omnibus already set up a number of changes. So for example, there was this portal to business regulation, which I'm not very familiar about, but it has been repealed. And there is also the incident reporting regarding cybersecurity and some of the data rules. Actually, currently there is also an amendment to the rules of application for the AI Act, which are currently ongoing and should be out soon. But as well, I mean, it's a thing that I was mentioning before, it's the data rule book. So it's to come into, with the Data Act would become the main act. So the Data Act will repeal the Data Governance Acts, the free flow of non-personal data, and the Open Data Directive will come into one single act, which will be the Data Act. So this is where also there will be some change, for example, that the Open Data Directive will become part of a regulation. So this is something that will come in the coming months. So it's really to have one single act that will simplify also the rules and to ensure, because this regulation, I mean, these different legislative instruments were put at different times with different needs, with different, I mean, before AI, most of them. So this is the important things. And I think that's all. I managed to save some minutes. I don't know if you have any questions that I will be able to answer.
There is any question
from the audience?
From the audience?
Online?
Yes, there is. 1 second.
Interoperable Europe Act. So, I mean, the Interoperable Europe Act, so, I mean, will not be changed because first it's a recent one. I mean, it does not enforce any obligation on data. So, I mean, the only obligation that is coming from the Interoperable Europe Act is the obligation for public sector to make this interoperability assessment that they need to publish. However, I mean, this is something we're working as well related to the Data Act, because the Interoperable Europe Board will also be the, I would say, the board defining standards and solution for the public sector to be used in an interoperable way. So, of course, there will be interactions between the two, but I mean, the Interoperability Act does not enforce any data rules. So this is why we're not part of it. It's not revised. And of course, I mean, we are just at the first year of implementation. And they will come. I mean, we don't know what the future is made of, but I mean, we have to review the Interoperability Act in a couple of years. So here we will see if there is the need to make some changes. But the Interoperability Act is, so far there is no change.
Thank you very much. Thank you, George.
Yeah.
The phone. I know it's one. Okay. This seems to be the latest set of slides. That's great. Okay, now it's time for the role of the DSSC, and it will be presented by Savvas Rogotis and Jelte Bootsma. So Savvas is a data ecosystem senior project manager at the DBA and part of the data space support centers. He focuses on stakeholder collaboration and engagement across Europe and international level, drawing on cross-domain experience from sectors such as agricultural, tourism, security, and e-governance. Jelte is a consultant in the data interoperability at TNO and the data space support centers. He specializes in semantic interoperability, working with Dutch standardization and contributing to the DSSC building blocks for data interoperability. Savvas, Jelte, welcome on stage. Okay, I suppose it's Savvas first. Yes, very good.
Thank you very much, Marcello, and thanks for the invitation here to present the DSSC and its role in the Common European Data Space and the data space ecosystem. Marcello presented me, so no, it doesn't make sense also to mention a few things about myself, but for today's session, I will be sharing the stage with my good colleague Jelte, that later on will come and present some aspects related to core assets that we are building in the Data Space Support Center for facilitating the deployment of the Common European Data Spaces. I will be setting up pretty much the scene about the DSSC. So for those that you might not be aware about the Data Space Support Center, it's a coordination and support action. It's an EU-funded initiative that started at the end of 2022. So we are pretty much running now for almost 3 years. And we have been doing a lot of activities together with the community, and I will be presenting more about this in my next slides. So first of all, as a short recap on what is the DSSC and what is its mission and its place in the overall ecosystem, DSSC is here to support the European data strategy. And here, of course, the interoperability part is key. You can see it in bold on the top left side of the slide. We are here to facilitate interoperable data sharing across sectors. How we are aiming to do this is by collaborating and building synergies with the community. And here, the ambition is to co-create together with the community a lot of assets that we are going to get them back into the community to foster the deployment of the Common European Data Spaces. I'm mentioning assets. The blueprint that Jelte will be presenting afterwards, it's a core asset of the Data Space Support Center, and this is why we are also bringing this with more visibility here. I mentioned the collaboration with our communities. Important thing is that apart from co-creating with them the assets that I'm mentioning, is also to support them in their daily operations, and for that, for the Common European Data Spaces, we are driving a lot of collaboration activities to support them in their day-to-day activities. And of course, we are here to support the European Commission the EDIB, we are the operational arm of the European Data Innovation Board that is setting the guidelines for the common European data spaces. I have been mentioning about the community, and I would like to present some aspects related to that. So the DSCC over the past almost 3 years has been building a very wide network of stakeholders. Okay, a key part of this network of stakeholders is the so-called community of practice. You can see it in this blue box in the center. That is actually a really hands-on community for us. It's consisting of members of the common European data spaces. For these members, we are trying to learn very practical aspects about how they are operating, how they are deploying data spaces in a key sector of the European economy. And of course, we are offering for them support. So it's a very important part of our community. More parts of our community and how we are building it, you can see on the right-hand side the Strategic Stakeholder Forum, that here we include very important organizations from Europe that could be considered important enablers, influencers, or users in data spaces. With this part of the ecosystem, we are trying to get advice from them, to receive recommendations. They have a very strategic and advisory role in the DSCC. And finally, we have the liaisons and collaborations on the left-hand side. Here you may see, and we are bringing here actors and parts of the ecosystem that are important for us to collaborate because they could bring us important requirements. You can see here liaisons with standard development organizations, with the AI community, with the cloud community, research projects, and I will be presenting later on a few things around this group as well. If I dive a little deeper in the community of practice, I mentioned that this is a very hands-on group. You may find here the logos of the common European data spaces that we are collaborating in the last few years. You can see that they are grouped in different sectors, and with all of them we have a very close collaboration. As I said, not only to learn from their experience, but to create our assets, and also to support them by getting back to them with a consolidated knowledge that we extract from all these interactions. The collaboration with the Simpl also follows into the umbrella of the community of practice, and we have also Valentina later on that will bring more aspects around Simpl. Now, the Strategic Stakeholder Forum I mentioned, it's a strategic and advisory group for the DSCC. It includes many organizations that are very influential in the data space ecosystem. You can see here DigiDigit, JRC, DigiSante. We can see here different DGs, national public authorities and agencies, non-profit associations, RTOs, National Regional Data Space Enabling Initiative, Industry Association, but also industry SMEs, large and mid-caps. You can see a big set of initiatives that we are collaborating also with them. We have 44 members at this stage from 22 EU member states. And here, the liaisons and collaborations have a really diverse group. I know that also you might not be able to see everything here, but I just want to present the complementarity of all these initiatives that we are collaborating, and in order for us to get important knowledge from the broader digital ecosystem. So again, I mentioned before the Standard Development Organization, research project, important European data initiatives, the hubs, AI initiatives, all of them are very closely connected to us. We have conducted already a lot of activities with them in order for us to be able to align and avoid fragmentation in the overall community. With all of this, I would like to highlight some relevant activities with our network of stakeholders. We have the thematic groups. We are aiming to drive discussions in different thematic areas like business, governance, and technology. And just to highlight some examples, in the last few months, we have been conducting a lot of activities. For example, in the technology thematic group about data models, ontologies, vocabularies, metadata descriptions. We have also the expert groups that are very narrow in scope. So the thematic groups, I didn't present them very well. They are consisting of representatives from all these members of the network of stakeholders, while the expert groups are very narrow in scope, are small groups that have as a single objective to supporting the creation of the assets. We have also a pillar that Jelte will be presenting that has been built in co-creation manner with these expert groups. We have conducting the surveys together with the community for the collection of standards, for maturity. We are conducting pilots, and interoperability pilot we have been running in the last period, but also the creation of collaborative papers, that some of them are very connected also to the topics that will be discussed now in SEMIC. And final thing from my side before giving the floor to Jelte, to my colleague Jelte, is that I have been mentioning assets here. You can see some of them. All of these are here, are important outcomes of the work of the DSCC in order to facilitate the uptake of the common European data spaces. We have been doing a lot of assets that will support the community, the glossary, the conceptual model, presented the network of stakeholders, the starter kit, collection of standards, the co-creation method, blueprint, toolbox, all of this. Some of this will be presented by Jelte. We have a lot of things. I would encourage you to visit our website, thedscc.eu, to find more about all these aspects, because I know that the time doesn't allow to go much more in depth. But you're free to join our website to find more about all of these assets and how they have been built and how they could contribute to the common European data spaces. And with this, I close my part. I would like now to give the floor to Jelte and invite him on stage to take over.
Thank you, Savvas. It's really good to be here today, morning. Yes. Thank you, Savvas, for introducing our DCC assets and what our DCC mission is about. Also would like to thank you, our previous speaker, especially George and Alexander. He really mentioned the focus on the use of making metadata fair and really the use on reusing data models, and I think that's a really key aspect of today. Savvas, you introduced the DCC assets, and one of the DCC assets is the data spaces blueprint, and there I would like to focus on a little bit more today. Because our blueprint, it's really a guide for data spaces, and with the blueprint we are trying to speed up the development of data spaces, and we are doing that by providing them best practices, specifications, but also standards. We are trying to do it along the way of the European Interoperability framework. So we have the business and organizational building blocks. They are more focused on the governance, the business, and the legal aspect. But we also have the technical building blocks, and they are more focused on the technical interoperability layer, but also on the semantic interoperability layer. And that's why I want to dive into today, a little bit deeper, and a little bit getting into the details of how the blueprint looks like. I think, Alexander, you already mentioned it, well, our metadata, we really need to make that fair. We need to publish that within our data space. I would like to have a little bit of a look at the right side of the blueprint, because that is regarding the publication of data within your data space, really about making data findable. And if you have read the Data Act, I haven't read all of that, but at least Article 33, it mentioned that each data provider needs to publish their data in a data space using metadata. So that's quite important. And this metadata should contain 4 elements mainly. So one of the things is information about the data scope and the data content, so about the usage restrictions and licensing. The second one is more about semantics and are more related to requirements for the data representation, but also the data structure and the data formats. This is really the semantics that I'm talking about, and I would like to dive into that a little bit later in a few minutes. But the third one is more about information and metadata about accessibility of the data, but also related to transmitting of the data. You can think of, for example, links to API specifications, where to actually access the data. And the last one is more related to the data sharing contracts and requirements for that. In order to publish this metadata in a data space, we really recommend the use of the DCAT standard. You already mentioned that, George. And once you have published that, but once you want to actually exchange the data itself, then we say, please make use of the data space protocol. This really enables the requirements between components within the data space, but also between data space participants itself. So that's on the right side of the blueprint. Now I would like to focus a little bit more on the left side, which is more related to semantics. Because once you are exchanging data, you also need to agree upon a shared language. And what we came across is that achieving this shared language is not really a technical problem. It's more a governance problem, so to say. So we believe data spaces need to think of that really in an early stage and define really what the agreements on semantics are within their rulebook. What I wanted to say about it, if we have a look at the data models building block, for example, we think that, I think you already said it, George, we really need to make reuse of existing models that are already out there. But what we came across is that there is also a lot of confusion about, okay, if we are going to reuse data models, what does data models mean? I've heard of vocabulary, I've heard of ontology, application profiles, but what do they actually mean? So if we zoom into the data models building block, it provides abstraction layers of what data models especially are. And we can have a look at that. This is mainly inspired also by the work of Geonovum of the MIM levels, but it's also leveraging the terminology of SEMIC. And if we have a closer look, we say it all starts with a vocabulary. These are just a shared dictionary, basic terms, basic definitions. It can be expressed in a standard like SCOS, for example. It's what we, at least in a data model building block, call the vocabulary. If we then go another level deeper, you have the ontology or ontological modules. I know SEMIC calls them, I think, also core vocabularies. And it uses the terminology that is being defined in the vocabulary itself, and it models them as concept, but it also models relationships between them. That's often expressed in a standard like RDF, OWL, or even UML diagrams can also be. But what we recognize is that ontological modules, they might not always be specific for a specific use case or for a specific application. So you need sometimes additional constraints to that ontological module for your specific application. And we call that the application profile. I think also SEMIC has really nice definition for that. And I think a great example of it is the DCAT AP standard, which is an application profile of the DCAT standard. And later at the bottom, we have the data schema, which is just a technical representation of this application profile. So you could think of XML schema or JSON schema, which can also be used in API specification, so to say, where it's really about the syntax and the structures. Okay, so let's now say we all have a shared agreement about what we mean with data models and what data models are. Let's see what data spaces need to do. And therefore, in this building block, in the multiple building block I showed, we have developed a 4-step approach that data spaces could take. And the first thing is that they really need to define what their data offerings are, or their data products, because this is really focused on the data that is flowing around within the data space, and this data needs to be semantically expressed within a data model. Like I already said, we then recommend to make really reuse of data models or extend existing data models that are already out there. I believe this has multiple benefits. One of them is if we make reuse of existing modules and we have a wider adoption, and a better adoption creates, well, leads to greater interoperability, so to say. The second one is more for the data space itself. They don't have to develop their own data models, which can be quite complex. They don't have to set up all the governance processes about who is doing what. But yeah, data spaces can develop their data models. And only if it's really needed, they can do that. But they really need to decide, okay, what kind of data model do we use? And it also depends on the data products that are flowing around within the data space. They really need to define that and specify that. Do I need a vocabulary or an ontology or both? And what are then the governance processes? Who decides what? So they really need to write that down. And it doesn't really matter whether you're reusing or already having or developing a data model yourself within a data space. But we say that each data model needs to be published within a vocabulary service in the data space. This is just an open environment such that the data models, so to say the shared semantics, can be findable and accessible for everybody within the data space. So let's now say a data space has done all of this, it's semantic interoperable, and they want to collaborate with other data spaces. And I'm going to challenge and trigger you a little bit here, because let's say they have done all of that, they want to collaborate, and they're basically standing before the same question is, oh, we need to agree upon a shared semantics, but now with another data space. However, what we are seeing is that data spaces develop their data models individually, also sometimes the tools, and these might be limited accessible to the other data spaces. So this results in not really reusing the data model, so to say. And I think, Alexander, you already mentioned the FAIR principles. And I think indeed a first solution would be to have a look at that FAIR principle, especially on the first letter in really making data models findable across data spaces. So what we think is that also we can also, just as data, we can describe data models themselves in a standardized manner, just as in a standard like DCAT. And this makes the data model findable, but also accessible across data spaces. I don't think this will solve semantic interoperability between data spaces immediately, but I do think this is the first step, because it opens up the discussion about reusing which data model. I also have provided a link with some more information if you would like to know that, but I just wanted to challenge you here. So I know this has been a lot of information, and I think this is also a lot of information for data space initiatives. So that's also why, as the DCC, the Data Space Support Center, we have developed a toolbox, which provides support to data spaces with tools. The toolbox is a curated catalog of tools that help organizations set up, participate, but also operate within a data space. And tools within the toolbox can be, for example, the connectors, aka the participant agents, the catalogs or vocabulary service, but we also have business and organizational tools. I will indeed wrap up, Marcello. I do think also, I believe the Simpl tools are also already within the processes of being included within this toolbox. And my call to you also would be, if there are any tools, we have an open submission process, so please, please submit. I don't have a lot of time left, but the only thing that I wanted to say today is, after 3 years of a Data Spaces Support Center, I do think we do a lot of work on harmonizing and converging of standards. I don't think the problem is technical. I do believe it's rather a governance problem, so to say. So that's it for today. I'm here all day, so let's have a coffee chat if need. Thank you, Marcello.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We have a question, maybe from online anyway. So in order to foster data interoperability, shouldn't the data schema format also be standardized?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's, I think all of these layers that I showed you, they also have representations and standards where they can be expressed in. So for example, there are multiple layers. If we're talking about ontology, they can be specified in RDF, for example. And if we are talking about a data schema, they should really use the concepts and the relationships that are already been defined in the ontology, and standardized, well, standards for the data schema or, for example, XML or JSON schema.
Thank you.
So I agree with the question that's being stated online.
Very good. We have another question from the audience, and then maybe there's plenty of questions. We'll take 2 more, and then we move on. Yes, the gentleman there, and I think, yes.
And otherwise, we can also come back in the coffee break. We can also have a chat. Please, go ahead.
It's to further elaborate on your comment. We need models for the data schema. And for instance, in the exercise of drafting, designing the RDCAT application, the recommendation was to use CSVW with RDF vocabulary. So RDCAT AP, which is an extension of DCAT AP, we extend it with CSVW, for instance.
So what's your question? It's not. It's my okay. I've indeed heard of that. Thank you.
The gentleman. Yes.
Yeah. Hi. Not a question, actually, just a comment. I would like to thank DSSC actually for publishing the blueprints and this data modeling part. My name is Michael Avhellström. I'm the lead of the Semantics group in the We Build large-scale pilot for European digital wallets, and especially European digital business wallets, which were really revealed actually just last week, this new regulation proposal. And in this We Build consortium that started in August, that will work on the issue of digital wallets and electronic attestations, we will definitely be applying all of these data modeling principles now in the blueprint of the DSSC, and that's a great thing to have something to rely on. It's like a backbone for us. We are going to introduce a SCOS vocabulary, OL ontology, and then do the attestations as application profiles, as shackle shapes. So thank you very much.
Thank you. That's good to hear.
Thank you. Peter?
Hi. Yeah, this works, right? Yeah, okay, good. Hi, I'm Peter. I was wondering about something you said in the beginning about the European Interoperability Framework. So you said, we follow the European Interoperability Framework. And I would like to get some more information. Can you elaborate on what aspects you use of the European Interoperability Framework? Is it just the 4 layers, or is it going beyond that and also looks at the principles, the recommendations?
Yeah, I indeed included it into the slide because it's just indeed, for this slide, I'm focused on these 4 layers, and we are trying with the blueprint. We have created building blocks where we use the OpenDI building blocks, and we added upon them with different building blocks, but the basis is the European Interoperability Framework, because we want to be interoperable on the legal level, we want to be interoperable on the organizational layer, and also especially on the technical and semantic layer. So I do believe these building blocks are more detailed, but they contribute in becoming interoperable on all of these layers.
And the current European Interoperability Framework is last updated in 2018. Now in 2026, there will be an updated version. Will that impact your work, like when the new?
To be honest, I'm not really 100% sure about how they will be updated, but I don't think it will impact.
But there is a session tomorrow about it as well. So,
well, let's go to that. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Jelte.
Thank you, Marcello.
Thank you very much. Okay, it's time to thank you. Questions we've done. It's time to move on to Simpl, the Cloud-to-Edge Federation empowering EU data spaces. So presenting will be Valentina Staveris. Valentina is an IT project officer at DG CNECT. She works in the cloud and software unit coordinating activities on Simpl. She previously spent over 12 years in the private sector across IT, consulting, and communication. Valentina, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning. So thank you for having me. I think, a lot of things have been said or mentioned already. So just for some people that might not know Simpl, so what is Simpl? Simpl is the open source middleware that is enabling data space initiatives. So the idea is really to support on one side, of course, with the SEC, the Common European Data Spaces, to fund the Common European Data Spaces and not reinvent the wheel every time, but have a middleware that is able or accelerate actually the adoption for the data spaces. So what is very important in Simpl is the open source aspect. So of course, the components should be free of use and also open source. So we are publishing, and I'll come back to that. We are publishing as the development is ongoing. We are publishing everything. So from requirements to code to the documentation. So free for the community to contribute. And we receive more and more contributions, so we are very happy about this. Also challenging the technical solutions and so on. So it's really very nice to see the community intervening for that. More specifically, Marcello already presented this slide, so that's just to give a bit the overall context of Simpl. So you see Simpl in between. So you have the legislation, as I said, the common European data spaces that are funded, and then the SEC, which is helping to set up the data space, and then Simpl, that is the technical implementation of the data space. Here, well, 2025 is a very important year for Simpl, because that's the first time in the AI continent plan that an IT software is really mentioned specifically, and this was the case for Simpl, so on the left side of the slide. And then last week as well, in the data union strategy, Simpl was mentioned again as a key enabler of the data union strategy, together, of course, with the Data Space Support Center. So what is actually Simpl? I think my colleagues already presented in a previous edition, but just as a reminder, we have 3 products. So Simpl Open being the middleware itself. Then we have Simpl Labs being the testing environment, where you can test the components of Simpl Open, but also test your existing data space interoperability. And then we have Simpl Live, what I call the journey of the Common European Data Spaces to know how to implement Simpl Open. So where we accompany Common European Data Spaces that are selected in order to understand how their implementation can integrate Simpl. Marcello, I think it's not the updated slides, actually. So, no, I don't think so. Just, so this is to give a bit an overview of the roadmap so that we have. We started the development early 2024 with the core components of Simpl, and this goes until end of 2026. So, so we are really building the main components that are useful for the Common European Data Spaces. Of course, very open to have more input in order to see what are the priorities, and we are already exploring some things that were mentioned, including the CAT IP. And then we have finalized a first wave of Simpl Live last year, and we are starting soon the integration of those Common European Data Spaces. And the testing platform, where we concluded the feasibility study in order really to implement the testing platform that will also start very soon in the upcoming, hopefully, weeks. And most importantly, but I'll come back to that, so we have a new contract that started, so a new project that started last week. So what we call the extension of Simpl Open. So basically adding new capacities to Simpl Open. So we have still the core features development that is ongoing, but of course we started we started actually to integrate also some new extensions that are very needed to the data space, so also to be aligned with the data union strategy, to enable the AI and machine learning capacities, and also to have access to the to the catalog of DOM, so the cloud marketplace. And also an important item for the sustainability of the data space is monetization. So that could be useful, of course, for the governing authorities, but also for the intermediaries. So what is very crucial in what was mentioned also in the latest weeks, the kind of data space season 2 of the Common European Data Spaces. I won't give all the details about this, but this is, I think the slides will be shared in any case afterwards, to have a bit an overview of this extension scope, because it's very new, so the information is not available yet, but we'll work on that. And so just for you to know, there is a first phase of analysis where we benchmark what is existing as a component, because with Simpl, we don't reinvent the wheel, but we reuse the components that are existing in the market and are applying our principles. So the EU, let's say, principles of security, of interoperability, and so forth. So, so we have this first phase of analysis, and then we will start the development. So please reach out. We have, on the website, we have established also a forum, so very eager to have any information or any recommendation that you might have. Sorry. As I said, the Simpl Lab, so these are the feasibility studies and then the integration that we do with selected common European data spaces. So we have now 2 waves that are ongoing. So the first one, so it's the bluish, if I know, it's the first ones are public procurement, the EOSC, Destiny, sorry, I'm lost in my slide, EHDS2, LDS, and smart communities that have concluded their first wave. And then we are starting in the upcoming weeks the integration phase, where we will see, according to the implementing scenario that they define, to see how they will integrate Simpl. Because one of the key aspects of Simpl is to be modular. So of course, this depends on a lot of factors in every data space. So the maturity of the data space is very crucial to see how also they will implement Simpl Open. Another important aspect that will be finalized soon is a pilot project that we have put in place, so what we call the Eurocloud, or European Public Sector Cloud Federation. So it's a pilot project we run this year with a few member states, so to see if Simpl could help in the technical implementation of this Public Sector Cloud Federation. So to see if member states can share infrastructure in the cloud infrastructure actually and use Simpl as enabler of this or facilitator of this. And then just a reminder on Simpl Labs. I know that this is something that is very, there is really an important expectation on this. So the feasibility study is done, and now we are really, in the upcoming weeks, we will start the implementation phase. So this, and hopefully by mid-2026, we will have already a first product to show and to present to you. So just as a wrap-up, so as I said, we are very keen on receiving feedback on the community. So save the date on the 29th of January. It's our annual event with the presentation of a lot of achievements that we had and also the future outcomes that we will have. So we'll be very happy to have you there. The registrations are open, so please click on the website and, well, this. Sorry for the something went wrong. The layout was not what expected, but so register on the website and please contribute to Simpl, because this is what would be the success factor, of course, for the Simpl in the future. So yeah, that's it. I have some, so no need to show.
Valentina, thank you very much.
More technical things. Yeah.
Yeah, apologize for the slides.
No
obviously,
no problem.
They were the wrong one.
Okay.
Many updates.
It's okay.
While waiting for some questions from the audience,
I can skip. So that's more technical slides so that you have available in case.
I wanted to ask one question. Now
Stay
I'm
with
a
us.
little bit in the corner. Yes.
With us.
So you were mentioning that some integration will going to happen with selected common data spaces. Now the big question, without perhaps revealing too much, but when do you think Simpl will be ready and open for other projects outside the common European data spaces?
Well, ready, you can already download the Simpl Open. So we have already components that are ready, but of course, if you intend to say the full integration package, let's say the main component that I mentioned, this is December 2026. So including, and I know that this is one of the very high expectations, is the Federation of Data Spaces. So this is a key priority for early 2026. Many data spaces mentioned that to us as a very crucial element of Simpl. So we really want to start the work done on this very soon, December, January, so that we can show something very quickly, ideally in the releases that are coming in the first half of 2026.
Very good. Thank you very much. Any question from the audience? Yes?
Okay.
I've got a question about the data union strategy, which was published last Wednesday. There's the mention of data lab. So do you have more information about this new concept? Thank you.
So the data labs should help actually to have like higher quality data in order to be able also to process, to favor the AI strategy, of course. And this is also in regard to Simpl. There is possibility to use Simpl as a key enabler of these data labs. But more than this, yeah.
Thank you. The gentleman over there.
Thanks. Is it working? Yeah. Thorsten from Luxembourg Ministry for Digitalization. Would it be possible, or perhaps it is too early, to give more details about how, more precisions, how Simpl is supposed to work exactly? So on a technical level, how is the data exchange done precisely, or how will it be done precisely? And you said that you will reuse existing building blocks, you will not reinvent the wheel. What are then the building blocks you will reuse, for example, that exist at European level? What are the technologies that you will build upon for data exchange, not to reinvent the wheel?
So the components, for instance, to give a bit some examples of components that we are using, for instance, are EDC connector that we customize a little bit, and actually we are contribute to we are soon contribute to the community also of Eclipse to give it back as an open source project. We are also implementing XFSA, so from GaiaX, and we are exploring the possibility to also integrate DCAT-AP, even so in combination with GaiaX, so that XFSC, so that we can help. So this is, let's say, part of the elements that we are reusing at the moment. Of course, I forgot to mention the data space protocol, of course. But of course, I invite you to have a look at our architecture document. It's available online, so you can have all the information that you desire. And of course, if you need more information or a feedback, or you have a different opinion, feel free to share that with us as well.
Thank you. I have a question from afterwards. I have a question from Miguel from Slido. It's related to the gentleman there. So it's regarding Simpl Open. It's been really hard to find any description about what it actually does, what functionalities are included. Any suggestion where to start reading?
The website and our GitLab, where you have technical documentation. You have also a video for installation of Simpl Open, and if not, reach out and we'll be happy to reply. I have also my colleagues at the EC services stand, ready to help you with any questions, not for Slido questions, but for on-site participants with pleasure.
Thank you very much. We'll take one more question. And Peter.
Hi, Valentina. It was. I'm a big fanboy. I'm like, this is.
Join the team.
Yeah, but I've seen so many European initiatives in the past that have either focused way too much on prototyping, and then others going way too much into production and just disregarding every prototyping that happened before. And over here, I see that you presented a great mix of everything. It's like, okay, we go towards implementations. There's a generic backbone behind it, and there's also simple labs where there's room for prototyping. So, and everything is open source. Like, this is fabulous. I mean we can contribute and so on. So I have an academic background, so I want to do prototyping mainly, and I wonder, like in the labs, in the Simpl labs, how can we start contributing? Would it be, for example, a good way to start contributing by going to the community meeting in January? I think there's a community meeting.
So you can of course come and share your thoughts for that, but then for the labs, so we are still in a very peculiar environment because we have a procurement ongoing for the main development. So the development of Simpl Labs will be done with one of the team, and they're present in the room, so you can have a chat with them. So with the teams that are in charge of the development, but as we are an open source project, of course we will involve the community, so you can, I'm sure you will find a way for you to contribute in Simpl Labs in the development, and then if you want to test Simpl Labs, then we will have so the opportunity to have you test and to have a private environment and so on for Simpl Labs. Yeah.
And is there a reason why you didn't mention the community event in January? Because that's happening, right?
That's the 29th of January. This is the community event.
Okay.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Because terminology. Okay. So this is the community event.
Yeah.
So we're happy to have it's online and on site. So in Brussels. So please.
Okay. Got it.
Okay.
Valentina, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, before the break, we start diving into some of the data spaces. Specifically, we're going to talk about the public procurement data space, presented by David Lucas Reche. David is a project manager at DG Grow. He has over 13 years of experience in IT and specializes in data management, linked data, AI, and digital transformation. David, please tell us more about the public procurement data space.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Yes, I think so. Okay, let me move this. Okay. First of all, PPDS stands for Public Procurement Data Space. And the first question is why we need a public procurement data space. And I think the answer is very easy. I assume all of you are taxpayers. I hope so. So I think you want to know how this money is spent, right? So the transparency is very important. However, we have a problem. We spend in Europe trillions in public procurement. However, only the member states they need to, let's say, to report to the European Commission the 20% of the data, because if the value is not above some thresholds, it's not mandatory to report. That means that all the data, the 80%, are in silos in every member state. So it means that we are losing the vision about how this money is spent in different languages, in different data models. So eventually we need to take all this data together and to be able to compare apples with apples. And this is what we are trying to do in PPDS. So the idea is that we want with the PPDS that everybody, you, journalists, public organizations, they can access to the public procurement data and to understand what is inside. So the transparency for this kind of data is very important because it's the money of the taxpayers. However, it's very complicated to deal with this data because, as I mentioned, it's not only about the barrier of languages and different data models, also the problem with the data quality. It's a big challenge. So in order to raise the competition between European companies, that a Bulgarian company can compete in a French procurement, it's important to understand how this procurement is working. So right now, it's important to mention that PPDS is not mandatory by law, it's voluntary. So right now we have some countries that they decided to join us and to start collaborating, sharing their data. Some of them, other of them are interested. We are currently working to attract more member states, but it's something that is ongoing. And to me, the most important thing about data spaces, because sometimes when we speak about data spaces, we are talking about semantics, data models, the CAT AP, the architecture of reference. But to me, the most important thing is to bring value with the data. To me, that's the end goal, and is the thing that we need to focus. So one of our use cases are the single market indicators scoreboard. Before, it was a very complex process to get this data, but now with the PPDS, we have more powerful dashboards, we have more filter system, and we are able to explore more the data. Also, we were able to create some data quality checks for the data from the member states, so we can report the member states like, look, your data is having all these problems. You should do something with that. And the same, this kind of approach with the data space allows us to go to a specific goal. For example, if we want to know how green is our procurement policies, we can measure. For example, measure how much we spend with the green vehicles. And just to mention that PPDS went live in 1 year ago exactly. I think it's one of the few data spaces that are right now in real production. It's not just a prototype. We are struggling with more than 10 million of notices. And now, how is the technical part? Here, I think it will be very interesting for the technical people in the room, because perhaps it's not as you expect. First of all, we support some principle for design from the beginning that we consider is very important. Of course, interoperability, right? That's why we are here in SEMIC, is the main goal. But also some points that are very important, especially now with the political context, that is the digital sovereignty. It's very important that we use open source tools. That means can be reused in other systems. We don't have this kind of vendor lock-in. Also, our architecture has to be cloud agnostic. So if you deploy your architecture in AWS and you want to move to Azure or to move on-premise, you should be able. If you are trying to use only, for example, native solutions that the time to market is much shorter, perhaps you will have problems in the future. So that's why also the portability is very important for us. This is a high-level view of some technologies. For the part of data, we are using some Apache. The language is Python. For the transformation, we are using RML. That is one of the standards for the V3O. For validation, Shackle, more Apache toolkits. But something that is very important for us is the part of ontology, because we are using the e-procurement ontology. That is an ontology for data that is maintained by Publication Office. I will speak about it later. Architecture. As you can see here, it's not like a normal application. When we are talking about data, and especially in this case data spaces, we need to have the mindset of a data pipelines. If we try to have like the mindset of normal applications, perhaps you can have problems. You have to design everything for data pipelines. So right now, we are working with the take data, that's the tender electric daily, that is where the data about the threshold is published, that is maintained by Publication Office. We collected this data, plus the member state that we are working on, plus in the future, the rest of countries. And we have this stage that is, we call it verification, because we make the data fair. As I mentioned, here is one data model, here another different data models, and using the procurement ontology, we are standardizing the data. Of course, there are some process, translations for different languages. If we are dealing with different currency that is not euro, we are also converting to euros, in order, as I mentioned before, to be able, in the dashboards, to compare apples with apples. And I'm pretty sure that the ones here in this room that you are familiar with the data space architecture reference, you know that data spaces aims to be federated, right? However, in PPS, we are a bit different. And I think this is important to remark. Because as I mentioned before, to me, the important thing is not to have a perfect architecture that matches let's say, the theory. So to have a pragmatic approach and to bring value with the data. So for our scope, it's not only to use a DCAT IP or another ontology for metadata. the important thing is also the data. So the data per se is the most important thing, right? Because you want to know how is the procurement in Romania, how is the procurement in France and in Denmark, and to speak the same language, right? So the scope was more ambitious, but what happened? The member states, they don't provide the data in EPO. So we had to do it. And this is a transformation effort that is very big because we are talking about millions of notices. So we have some technical problems with that, performance problems. We tried first, in the first approach for the PPS, to use a federated approach. We failed. I think it was a big lesson learned about the performance and so on. And finally, we needed to materialize some data. We couldn't make everything on the fly, everything in memory, so we had to materialize some data. So due to this problem with the technical point of view, we had another problem, that is some of the use cases. We are using the data to calculate some single market indicators. And for these indicators, the calculations are very heavy. That means that it's not something that you can do on the fly. You need to materialize data, to convert some data, to do some operations. So it means that, as I mentioned before, we had this point that we are centralizing data because from the technical point of view was the only one solution. Of course, we plan in the future to be fully federated, but right now we need to move with this approach. Data models, as I mentioned, the most important thing, EPO, is the public procurement ontology maintained by Publication Office, is our main tool, is our heart, because all our data is using this data model. And well, for the ones that you are more familiar with the data models, for the structure of the organization systems, SKOs, the CAT for vocabulary of the data catalog, and one other one that is more for example, Provo, for the provenance. And as I mentioned before, I think I don't want to repeat myself again, but e-procurement ontology is very important for us, is the key, because we ensure that everybody is speaking the same language for public procurement. About data catalog, I know that I think that our colleague from the SSC, they mentioned that they are encouraging to use the CAT AP. We were exploring different models for the catalog, also the CAT BREC AP. And after some analysis for our use cases, we needed to do something custom. That's why it's called the CAT PPDS AP. I don't want to go to the technical details. We can discuss later on, perhaps in the coffee or in the lunch. But just to mention that for our specific case, we need to have some customized properties, and that's why we are not using the CAT AP, just to clarify this part. Well, this is the technical implementation. And something that is very interesting that we are working on is to agree on common rules for the public procurement. What does it mean? There are some ideas that are not very clear what they mean or how they are, let's say, defined. So for public procurement, what we are doing is creating a rule book that can be used later in the semantic part to define the rules about reconciliation, about validation, about how to reach the data in ontology. Because we were struggling many times about how to do some things. So what we are doing is to have in a natural language, let me show you like here, for example, here we have an example how we define some of the rules. In this case, it's about how to use the data for specific use cases. We define, let's say, in natural language our rules, so they can, let's say, be understood by everybody. It's not in the source code, it's publicly available. And what we have is like a workflow that we discuss with the DigiGrow business owners in order to approve or reject a rule. And if it is approved, it's implemented in the system. Here's a bit the example. We are using our GitLab as the room to put all these rules, and then it's implemented, as you can see, in another GitLab that is the GitLab for development. About the part of policy, you know, I'm project manager. I'm not an expert in legal topics, but I understand that for some of you this is important. First of all, PPDS is voluntary, it's not mandatory, as I mentioned before.
and it's funded by the Digital European Program provided by DG Connect. I think it's important. They believe strongly in us. We are investing a lot on this project, and little by little we are having, I think, very interesting results. Of course, it's part of the European data strategy. We are trying also to adopt the Interoperable Euro Act, the data governance. Also, we are going to be integrated with Simpl. It's part of the plan. And we are trying to make PPDS play an important role for the future legislation. For example, imagine that if we can enforce member states to publish in the transparency portals all the data in EPO, could be great, because it means that from the member states, they will start speaking the same language as everybody. For the future of the PPDS, due to some problems that we have due to the time to market to go to production, we need to fix some part of the architecture. So right now we are refactoring some part of the architecture. So this is the plan for the next year in the first part. Then we plan also to onboard new member states. We are also doing some proof of concept with SparkWell. Anything that this is more a proof of concept that for the experts in the room we can discuss later. And we are going to add more dashboards to bring more transparency and, let's say, easy to understand the data with this kind of dashboards. We plan to include also more data using Eurostat, combining with Orbis, that is the data for companies, to publish the PPDS in the Open Data Portal. And I think for many of you it could be very interesting, the last two use cases. One is the Grita tool to detect the fraud. I think this is very interesting. And also to use the AI to allow everybody ask to the PPDS, how about this? Very easy, you don't need to understand a SparkWell or any kind of query language. Just with natural language, you will be able to retrieve the data that you are interested in. Of course, the last part is important, is the integration with Simpl, that will allow us to connect with other data spaces. This is for the AI that I mentioned before. We have a lot of data, we have millions of notices, but sometimes it's very difficult to access to this data because not everybody understands SparkWell, not everybody is able to perform these queries. Perhaps the filtering dashboards are not enough. So our idea is to have a chatbot, and you can ask a simple question or complex question to the PPDS and obtain the data. Please tell me how is the green vehicles procurement process done in this country and this one, and why this one is more expensive than the other one. And you will have all this data in a very easy way. I think this is very powerful. And the fraud detection, that I think is something very important. And we can see a real example about fraud. This is in Spain. You can see these, these lines. Above 15K, you have to go to competition. As you can see, the darkest line is just below 15K. It means that in public procurement, they are making a lot of procurement below this because they don't want to go to competition. It's easier, it's faster, I can understand, it's more flexible. However, it means that the approach is not correct. And these kind of patterns, we need to detect and we need to report to the member states. I think this is what I mentioned before. Perhaps it's not federated, the system, but the value that we are going to bring with the data is the important thing. And well, as I mentioned before, Simpl is very important for us, this integration, because in the moment that everybody is able to connect all the data spaces, to combine all the data, it's when I think all this European data market is going to make the difference, and I think it's very important. And well, that's all from my side, so thank you.
Much. We accept a question from the audience, the gentleman in the front first. While waiting, I have a question from Mark. So is in PPDS, is all data already open?
Not all, because we have, let's say, the policy to let the data provider to choose between the data fully public or if some fields or some data they want to be private, we respect it. So we have some data that's private because the member state they requested.
Thank you.
All right, so yeah, thank you very much for the presentation. Quick question. So if I think of my experience as a bidder to public procurements from 15, 20 years by now, I would say the process is really often very frustrating and not very efficient for either side. So do you plan in the data space to kind of address the two main potentials, i.e. make the tenders themselves better, more efficient, like more successful in its outcomes probably, and also make the bidding process more efficient? Like we, for example, we always submit the same documents 10, 20 times a year. And is that like a long-term perspective that you envision?
Yeah, it's one of the goals of the PPDS. You know why? Because sometimes imagine, just a very bad example, okay? And you are like a small country, right? And you don't have the experience as Germany to build highways, for example. You can access how Germany is making all this process of procurement, how are the notices, how are the competition notices. You can learn from this and apply for yourself. And also, it could be helpful because you can have some prices or reference to understand if the bidders, right, they are in the price that makes sense or they are being even more expensive than you expected. I think it's a very good reference to improve your procurement.
Thank you. No? Okay. Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm Stefan Dedovic from Soprasteria, and I would like to ask you one question. As you discussed and showed this map of interested, non-interested, and unknown, and you mentioned technical challenges, but then I'm wondering the reasons for not interested and unknown, and then have you conducted any evaluation of their interest in an ongoing situation, implementation, etc.? And what do you expect in the future? So do you expect that there will be enforcement of this public procurement data space as if is HDS, etc.?
I think so. In the future, yes. In the future, yes. And I will tell you why. We have right now one example that is, because apart from PPDS, also I was working in the European Regulatory Agency. And in the legislation, they published that they have to use in this case, the error ontology as a way to publish the data. So I think this part of using common ontologies for data is the future, and eventually it will be enforced. That's my point of view, but of course, right now it's not the case.
Okay, one last question from Alexander.
Thanks a lot, David. Really impressive what you're doing with DigiGrow and the public procurement data space. My question is about single market indicators that you mentioned. If you can expand a little bit, and in particular, if there is something on digital single market indicators there, and how does it work, if you can say a few words. Thank you.
Yes, and the single market indicators scoreboard is something that you can find in the PPDS website. It's publicly available. I think we can share the slides afterward, right, for everybody. Let's see, are some indicators that measure how, let's say, competitive is the single market. For example, the first indicator, the single bidder, means that for every competition, in how many cases there is only one single bidder. That is very bad news that that's the case. And unfortunately, it's something that is growing on the time. That means that we are perhaps losing competitiveness, or perhaps we need to help more to the SMEs to be able to join forces and compete. So it's like some indicators that DigiGrow is reporting for long. I'm not the main expert here in public procurement, but yeah, the idea is to measure how is the single market in terms of competitiveness.
Thank you very much, David.
That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I propose to have a 15 minutes break. It's been intense, but we are almost on time despite the initial issue that we had. After the break, we're going to have health data space, we're going to have Green Deal and SAGE, and finally the panel discussion. So 15-minute breaks, I'll see you here at 15:15. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll go over a little bit of what European health data space is about, especially for secondary use. We will look at the central platform, health data at use central platform ecosystem. And then we will take a look on the release 5 and a little bit on the application profile for health of DCAT. So what's it about? First of all, there are 3 strands, the primary use, the secondary use, and the electronic health records. So the primary use mostly focuses on the actually health data for day-to-day use, the prescriptions, lab results, dispensations, stuff like that. The electronic health records is the interoperability standards, and it's applicable for both primary and secondary use, and it's the registration of health systems and wellness applications, and then the secondary use, which is our main focus, which is the health data that can be used for, regulatory activities, policy making, all of those investigations, that kind of subjects. So on the overall timeline, we have 5 callers. March 2025, the EHDS regulation was adopted. From that point on, we had stakeholder support. So we had a direct grant to support member states in implementation of the regulation. So this is the community of practice. And we have been working together with colleagues from member states in trying to have them implement the regulation. We had a joint action for member states agreeing on the member rules. This is the TEDAS project. A grant for experts delivering data quality and utility of labels, which is called Quantum. And then a contract signed with a company for member state capacity building. These are workshops and learning materials so people can get actually certified on the EHDS regulation. The development of the DG SANTE Health Data at EU Central Platform also started at the same time, a little bit earlier actually. And then we had the member states do end-to-end testing. They test connectivity and they test conformance with the health data at EU Central Platform, trying to establish connectivity and trying to actually have operations to create, update and delete data sets, and also be able to receive data access and data request applications, as well as responding to those applications. And then operations will start by 2029, and we will have an help desk to help on the support of everyone that's in production. So our ecosystem, so we will see that we have entities on the national side, whether it is hospitals or other entities that produce health data. These entities will also have health data access body portals on the national infrastructure. On those portals, they will make data sets available, and then those data sets will become available for publishing and sharing on the health data at EU Central Platform. On the national infrastructure, there will always be a health data access body coordinator portal, which will have a national contact point. So this national contact point is the single point of contact with the health data at EU Central Platform. On the health data at EU Central Platform, we also have a contact point, and this will establish the connectivity between the member states and the health data at EU Central Platform. We also have data holder systems not on member states, but on union bodies such as EMA, ECDC, and SANTE. Those union data access service portals will also have a contact point, which will, again, connect with the health data at EU Central Platform. And then we will have also more third-party countries or international organizations also connecting with the central platform and feeding data sets into our catalog. So what you're seeing here is actually, and you can scan the QR code if you want to access our health data at EU Central Platform. This is online and it's now currently on release 5. This is our homepage, and you can see also our timeline in the bottom of what we have accomplished so far since release 0 on January 2024, and what are our objectives until release 8, which is January 2027. Here you can see how the catalog is being presented to the data user that navigates through the Health Data@U central platform. All of this is built based on the data sets that we have. So the filtering information that you have available is coming from Health DCAT properties. So unless the properties are available on the data sets, they will appear in the filters, and this is generated automatically for the user interface. This is the detail of a data set. So we'll have all of the information regarding the data set, all expressed in Health DCAT application profile. And on the right side, I'm sorry, you will see the distribution. So the distributions is actually the sets of data that you can actually ask access for if you want to, build your own research or try to make policy. And you add to the basket, and from the basket you build an application, and that application is going to be delivered through the access points to the member states that are involved. So you can select distributions from multiple data sets from multiple member states. All of the member states involved on the application will receive that request, and from there, according to their decision, data permits would be issued, and you'll have access to a secure processing environment where the data is going to be made available for you to do your investigations. On the sample distributions, we don't show it here, but on the sample distributions, you can see a small sample of the actual data that's an anonymized sample of the actual data that you are going to have access to, and also variables that are available for you to select. And you can see those variables here. This is the section 1 of a data access application. So you need to fill all of those sections, but on the first section, you can see that you can select exactly the variables that are interesting for you. All of this has been shared and made available on our GitLab on Code Europa. We have many modules that are already available, modules for the user interface, modules for the search engine, for the statistics, for the interoperability testbed, which allows for connectivity and conformance testing, authentication, translation, the infrastructure, so the dispatchers and the contact points that build the infrastructure and allow member states to communicate with the central platform, and functionalities for Release 6 will focus on status management and data permits and decisions issued by the member states, and how that communication is going to be addressed from the member states to the applicant, and from the applicant also to the member states to be able to respond. So to build this, we created with our colleagues and our collaborations with SEMIC, with the pilot, an application profile for health based on DCAT. We introduced on this release 5 health-specific properties, and of course the access right property. The access right property allows you to define if your data set is public data and it's available for everyone. If it is restricted and you need to actually have a permit to use that data, or if it is non-public and you actually need to have an application to create a permit, and from that permit to be able to access a secure processing environment so that you can access the data. We have already published our first draft of the Health DCAT specification. Here you can have a vision of all the relations and UML modules for the Health DCAT specification to start building your system and start creating data sets. We defined mandatory properties for non-public data sets, which is the main goal of our application. And we also defined health properties for non-public data sets. And we created some supporting tools so that learning Health DCAT and using Health DCAT, it's easier, and try to have it autonomously pass the knowledge so that data sets can start being created. So we have the Metadata Model Explorer, which is basically a walkthrough through the specification. It allows you to see all the properties for different access levels, and from there, the usage notes, the descriptions, and the definitions of each property. And then we have the Dataset Description Assistant, which is basically a formula that takes you to all of the properties and allows you to actually fill in. And by the end, you will be able to extract an RDF or a turtle file that you can actually use and actually create a data set on the Health Data.to central platform. We can see here on the left side the metadata model explorer, and on the right side the dataset description assistant. So the metadata model explorer, nothing more than something to explore the properties, and the assistant, some hands-on tool that allows you to create. That's it for my current state. If you have any questions.
Let's see if there are any questions.
Thank you.
I definitely do. But let's start with Mark then. Perfect. While the microphone is coming, and then I think Valentina also had a question.
Slido, if you have access to Slido.
Yes, but Slido, we have some issues. Has some sort of delays. So I don't see your question. I'm sure that I will see you in 5 minutes.
The first is, oh shoot, I'll read them.
Sure.
How does EHDS2 Health Data.to implement the 5 safes, especially in secure processing environments, and how are the secure processing environments deployed and managed? And also, how does Health DCAT specify access rules? Is it machine actionable, use ODRL, etc.?
So the first question is a little bit hard for me to answer because the secure processing environment is going to follow an implementation from another team that's responsible for the creation and the deployment and guaranteeing everything for the secure processing environments. For the second question, could you repeat it? Access rules to... What is the format of the access rules? Oh, it's machine readable. So we built everything. So the Health Data.to, the Health DCAT specification is built based on constraint files, shape files, and from there we create the configuration files that create the UI for the dataset assistant, and from the MME, the metadata model explorer.
I have a question, waiting for someone else perhaps, is regarding restricted data. Do you have a specific requirement for categorizing data in a specific way, or it comes from the member states, the hospitals?
Yeah, so according to the access level that you define, whether it is public, restricted, or non-public, the Health DCAT specification changes on the mandatory and the optional and the recommended fields. And following this is where you can start building data sets that respond to those elements that are mandatory, optional, or recommended. So if you go for public data, you actually have more leniency on what you can leave out and you can include. If you go for non-public, then more data is mandatory and you need to actually put it on the data set so that discoverability and availability is there.
And that's when you follow up. That's when is where to find the data or how to find the data in the metadata itself. So is it searchable, although it comes out as in restricted? But if you want more information, contact this particular authority.
The information that we have, it is metadata. So everything is searchable inside of that data set. If you want to know more about the data, if you want to have, more information about the actual data that you are going to get for your study, for your investigation, for your policy making, then you need to go through the process of contacting the member states and the data holders through our platform, creating data access applications, or in other cases, maybe reaching out directly through the catalog information, because we will have a contact point, an email, or something like that, and you can reach out. But I think I answered your question.
Yes. Okay. If there are no further questions, I'll thank you very much, Nuno.
Thank you.
For your contribution. It's been very interesting.
Thank you.
Let's move on with the Green Deal data space. So presenting, we have a dual presentation, but maybe we have we introduce the speakers one after each other. So first and foremost is Thorsten Reitz. Thorsten is the CEO of Wetransform, where he specializes in spatial and environmental data interoperability and operates large-scale data infrastructure. He has contributed to OGC, ISO, and national standards, created the FOSS ETL tool, Hail Studio, and is actively advancing data spaces and data ecosystem across Europe. Thorsten, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. So let's try this. Yeah, that seems to work. Great. Yeah, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Very happy to be able to present a couple of things. And those couple of things are actually, first of all, the report that Alex, Marco, Jordi, a couple of the JRC people and me just released a week ago on interoperability specifically for data spaces. So what can we learn from the past? How could we do it better in the future? And the second thing that Mark and me are going to talk about, how we can apply such principles, for example, for the Green Deal data space, because that's actually a good example of all the problems that we're typically dealing with. Yeah, just a little bit from my background. So one of the things that Wetransform did in the past 10 years is that we actually processed a lot of data sets, very heterogeneous, 1 megabyte to 100 terabyte, all kinds of themes and domains you could imagine. So that we're now at about 150,000 data sets that we harmonized overall, 120,000 approximately from Inspire. That has given us quite a few insights into what typically makes interoperability hard and what makes it effective or not effective in some cases. So why do we even care about, why do we want interoperability? For me specifically, it's because we really need to have impact at scale and at speed. So we can't be inefficient anymore. So we have so many challenges in front of us. We want Europe to be competitive. We want it to be resilient. We want it to be sustainable. And to do that, we really need to create a working market for digital solutions that help us do things better. We're trying to build digital ecosystems that really create both resilience and opportunity for startups, for solutions that really make a change. If we want to make that work, there's typically multiple aspects to take into account. The one that I'm going to focus on today is the last one, sufficient and effective interoperability. So I think, this is a bit preaching to the choir here, but interoperability is something that we still require. It's something that typically, if you ask stakeholders in any given area, it always comes up out on the top of the list. What do you expect? You expect to be able to use data from different sources, chain systems together, etc. So it's essentially what enables cooperation between actors. There was this old statement that the connections we have between our systems are basically representing the human and organizational connections we have. And if we can't talk to each other, if we don't have the same language, then yeah, it just won't work. It's also the thing that basically enables us to quickly apply a good solution at scale. Because right now, what happens in Europe is often you have good solutions, but they stay deployed in a very small context. Yeah, obviously, access to large amounts of interoperable data also enables better solutions, access to data pools for machine learning, for example, and it prevents lock-in and gives us the sovereignty that we need. But we also know it's not really easy to achieve. So I think all of us have been in the projects where we've had to really grind for a long time to properly get the data across multiple actors and systems. The main challenge in my experience is usually to get sufficient agreement and buy-in from all the actors that are involved. So it's not about the technical issues, those exist, but actually agreeing on stuff, as usual, tends to be hard. Another issue is that often you kind of have this expectation that one side is responsible for creating interoperability. Like either it's the data holder who has to provide all the data in some standard, or it just lies with the data user. Well, the data is out there, so if you want to get some benefit from it, do all the work, please. Yeah, and of course, it's also often that people feel like they have to be uncompromising, not really accepting that interoperability can actually mean some degradation in areas, basically have some information loss, for example, but still you come out net positive. And this is especially true in the area that I'm mostly familiar with, which is green data, environmental, geospatial data, etc., where it's traditionally super fragmented. Yeah, but at the same time, this has been recognized for quite a while. Data interoperability and quality are key for the exploitation of data value. So without these, we will not really make progress. So how do we effectively achieve that? And for that, there's two things that we looked at and that are also detailed. So if you want to, there's this report again that I mentioned before that really goes into the details basically that we observed during a study done already 1.5 years ago, looking basically at what kind of legal provisions were there in the past, how did they actually specify what they meant by interoperability, and did they really have an impact on data assets that are out there. They did this work together with Jordi, Marco, Alex, and Brooke, so big thank you to all of them. And the first thing that we actually did was to see how could we actually measure interoperability, so to speak. And for that, we created this framework with aspects of interoperability, 3 axes, semantic, do we mean the same thing? Technical, can we actually exchange it between systems, read the formats, etc. And process interoperability, i.e. is the way that we create the data homogeneous enough so that the data in the end is actually combinable. And what we specifically looked into is how each of the provisions that have been out there in the past from different legal acts like INSPIRE, even very specific ones like the European Environmental Noise Directive, High-Value Datasets Implementing Act, TNITS, and so on. So we looked at some of these examples and basically looked at, okay, and what did happen after these got implemented? And you can see that some like END, for example, had quite a lot of impact. So they had a smaller scope, but in that scope, in that data scope, the impact was significant. So most of the data sets are now, for example, semantically and technically interoperable, actually. And if we look a little bit deeper at INSPIRE, because that was the regulation with the widest scope, there's a few things that we basically learned, especially the work on the semantic side, on the conceptual side, is something that really makes sense to retain. So we have now standards that define concepts, code lists, vocabularies, etc. And all of these are things that we still need within the data spaces. Something that's also really positive is that most available data sets that are accessible now, there are tens of thousands of these, are actually using open formats like GeoJSON, GML, and so on, and also open APIs. And that's a huge difference to 10, 15 years ago. So it's really nice to see that that at least worked. And we shouldn't also forget that this data, everything that's published as INSPIRE, is actually well documented because there are the technical guidance documents and so on. And that's also a huge difference to before. There's also a few things that did not work as well. So for example, we still have gaps in vocabularies. There's a lot of complexity that kind of snuck in that made it sometimes hard to really harmonize data. And we also had a bit of an issue was the somewhat inflexible legal framework we used to have in INSPIRE, but that's being addressed right now. So if we look at basically at everything that we learned from analyzing these past initiatives, something that comes out in terms of having high impact, but at the same time not causing too much effort and complexity. And if you want to know how we measured that, again, please read the report. But there's a few things that you can really take away for future and currently ongoing projects that make a lot of sense to focus on because they tend to have a lot of impact without being too expensive. And it's really easy things like just being clear about what your units or reference systems are. So if you have measurements, what unit are they in? Document that. Using open data formats, access through open APIs, dictionaries, code lists in open machine-readable formats. Those are the things that really are not too hard to implement and already make a lot of difference. How do we get there was basically the second big question that we asked in the study. So now we learned from the past, we know what the high impact things are, but how do we actually get there? And for that, we are also taking a look at governance for interoperability. And specifically, the scope of that was looking at the European common European data spaces. I did focus on the Green Deal data space and made some specific provisions, suggestions for that. But overall, the idea is that there will always be these points of intersection where some handover and some agreement is required. Like, for example, one of the use cases that we were dealing with needs data from both the Green Deal data space and from the energy data space. Basically, when you want to create wind turbines that are planted in a forest and you need to find areas where to place compensation trees and so on. And within each of these data spaces, be it a sub-data space or something where you want to work across data spaces, the thing that needs to happen is that you will find a balance of responsibilities. When you create interoperability, there are people who benefit from it, and there are people who have some effort from creating it. And it's really important that you, A, balance these two things, and B, also assign responsibilities in such a way that it's overall effective. Like, for example, there are certain ways that if you bundle them through an intermediary, you create a huge win-win. Or you create bundling by combining certain functions, and then you, for example, achieve the goal of doing the reporting only once, and so on. So considering scale effects, synergies, subsidiary principles in this hierarchy of data spaces is really important when you try to balance these responsibilities. The study has some more detailed proposals on how to do that in the cases of the common European data spaces. Yeah, for example, one of the proposals that it makes is to establish so-called data interoperability groups. So basically within a data space, that would be a group that consists mostly of technical experts, gets the business input, and finds or develops solutions for interoperability. That would be very close to what we heard earlier from the DSSC. Another suggestion that comes out of this is, and this is for me one of the key ones, is to think about compliance as something that you do iteratively, that you approach step by step, where you do the really important things that create a lot of value early on, and then you deeper and deeper integrate the systems and assets that you have. So for example, you can start with findability and accessibility in homogeneous formats, and then you go down step by step through semantic harmonization, documentation, and finally process harmonization. Like, for example, process harmonization is something you have in the meteorological community. They have very clear rules how every temperature value has to be measured. Yeah, and in the end, what the study provides is it makes all of these suggestions in the form of suggested provisions. You could call that a governance blueprint. So if any of you is wondering how to implement interoperability and get towards that in your data space, I again invite you to take a look at that. That's it from my end. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Mark.
Introduction first, please. So Mark is going to talk about SAGE, right? The data space for sustainable Europe. Mark is a technical coordinator of SAGE. He's actively involved in both data space community and European Open Science Cloud since 2020. That's all I have for you, but thank you very much. Please, this floor is yours.
Thank you. So thanks everybody. Thank you for the SEMIC organizers to invite us here. Thank you for my colleague Thorsten, whose company Wetransform is a partner in SAGE, and I have several other partners here in the audience, so I appreciate your involvement and participation. I'll try to quickly set the stage and to do it quickly. Let's see if I hit the right button. Yay. Okay, so let's remind ourselves what a data space is intended to do. I asked the question earlier to the guy from, I think it's David from, there you are. From PPDS. Is it all open data, or is it mostly open data? And it was largely open data in the PPDS. There is some restricted data. But from our perspective in the Green Deal data space, a real challenge is the fact that we're dealing with a huge heterogeneity of data from open to fully closed. We have to support, as a one use case, circular economy, textile use case, soil circularity, et cetera, where there's real concern about the data and who will get to see it. So we need to be able to control that correctly. So we have a continuum, and the blue parts of the picture here were drawn in 2020, the Open Data Institute. That I stole, I attributed that, but basically from closed to open, but those modalities were defined 5 years ago. We're defining in data spaces an additional one, attribute-based access control, the purple thing. So that looks a little more distinct, and we will implement that over time. We're also implementing some of what the Open Data Institute has defined through data sharing groups, which is a way to manage the control of data even within a data space. So our objective is to share, but to leave the control of who gets to see the data, who can use the data, with the person who's responsible, whether it's a data holder or what have you. So this has required these data sharing groups. We have multi-level reporting, cities, regions, nation states, member states, the EU itself, as well as a global component where we have the Green Deal, which is not just the European Union. So we need to be able to move data back and forth, and we need to retain or respect the governance at each layer. Supply chains need their own data flows, and they also need these data sharing groups to manage the visibility of data around the supply chain, as well as to allow reporting upstairs to the Producer of Responsibility Organization, PRO, which is defined by the ESPR, as well as various other reporting to bodies. So, and lastly, this data sharing idea is important for value creation. If we want to have a sustainable data space, we want to have the ability to create and retain value for not only for the participants, but also the data sharing, the data space itself. So just to remind ourselves, our mandate in the Green Deal data space in SAGE is to create to deploy a production data space. We're not doing pilots. We're not doing, attempts. We have 10 use cases that we will essentially force to implement their business models in the SAGE data space. So these are data-driven businesses. We're pushing the envelope here to make them use a real live data space, and our objective is to have a sustainable data space by 2028. So that's actually before the release date of the EHDS, which is 2029. So we have a very aggressive objective. So a quick overview of the key features. We have the control plane and the data plane. For those of you who are not familiar with the data space world and more into semantics, which many of you are, I understand, but this is sort of the classic structure, the relationship between the data space and the participants themselves, who have their own capabilities, their own technical infrastructure, which connect into the data space using connectors, what has been called connectors or participant agents or the Simpl open agent as it's being discussed in Simpl. We're also defining the governance plane and the trust plane. And that's where we define the different rules, the rule book that might apply for the data space, the Green Deal data space, as well as the external trust providers that we want to work with. So there's an entire process for managing trust in the Green Deal data space. There is one in other data spaces as well, but we're working very hard on this to make this applicable to other areas. So we've talked about connecting data from different sources. We will have connections to many of the sources. You can't read them. Can I read them? Some of the SFREs, the SFRE research infrastructures, EMODNet, which is a European Commission-funded ocean data network, EEA, the European Environmental Agency, GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Framework or Foundation, IRENE, which is another RI, Inspire data sets, as well as Copernicus, the Blue Cloud Digital Twin, Destination Earth, etc. So a lot of data sources which are close to open or nearly open and which we want to integrate into the Green Deal data space as data sources. We also want to link to other data spaces. So we want a capability that allows users, participants from the SAGE data space to see data from other data spaces and not necessarily to go through some extra layer, this linking layer, which we're not sure how it would be implemented, but we absolutely have a requirement to be able to connect to agriculture, to smart cities, to energy, and the European Open Science Cloud Federation of Data Spaces. We want to share data across these places. And I draw this, you'll see the slides, you can get a little feeling for it, but basically we envision an ability where connectors in the SAGE data space and connectors in the agricultural data space can actually talk to one another. They don't need to go through some intermediary, they can have a communication directly using the attributes or the artifacts of governance that are presented and openly presented in each of these data spaces. The data sharing groups are subsets, they're ecosystems that live within the data space. We do this because we have 10 use cases, from circular textiles, to the forestry use case, to environmental hazards. These are entirely different worlds. They have entirely different data models. They have entirely different models. Some have very heavy involvement of member states. Some have no involvement of member states. They're purely a function of the private companies who are working together and trying to do a better job in the world of the Green Deal. So we want to give them some safety and security in order to know how they're sharing their data. So we have introduced the idea, or formalized the idea, of data sharing groups where we might have derivative governance, derivative rule books that are consistent with the master rule book, but at the same time allow different groups of people to interact in a more closed environment. Thorsten talked about the governance of interoperability. And I also want to say we want to have interoperability of governance. So there needs to be a way to describe the governance rulebook for the data space itself, for the data sharing groups, for the individual data holders in an interoperable way so that we can achieve accessibility. There's no point in having accessibility if you're not actually allowed to access the data. So you need to be able to understand what the rules are before you even look at the data. So that's what this is. I won't read it right now. We can talk more about it. We don't have enough time right now. So here I'm talking about sharing data with participants. When you get a copy, you can see the individual steps. I actually called that out before. This is all about governance interoperability. So now let's talk about semantics. The challenge, and the words are a little too small here, but in Green Deal data space, there are too many domains for the Green Deal to pick one model. We have to be able to support well-defined models that are out there, and in fact, we also need to allow for poorly metadata, poor compliance data to be incorporated. So when people are doing reports about their CO2 and their generation of greenhouse gases, they need to be able to use whatever formats are available, otherwise they won't participate. You need to be able to absorb stuff that's kind of sloppy. And you also need to be able to engage with other types of what I call elephants, the big guys in the room that say, I'm Copernicus, I'm not going to follow your rules. I'm EMODnet, I have a contract, I don't have any money to do what you want me to do. You have to comply with my API. So we need to work with that. We need to be able to be very flexible there. So as Thorsten was describing, we're implementing the 5-star model or a multi-star model to allow people to be motivated to improve their interoperability while not excluding people. So we would have individual dimensions of interoperability that we would attempt to evaluate in an automated way and to assign stars. That will allow AI models to look at data and say, well, this is a low number of stars and I have to do a lot of work to make this data compliant. This other data has a high number of stars and I may be able to absorb it or ingest it in a training model right away. So a quick thought about SAGE and Inspire. Basically, we are looking at we need to have flexible links to existing catalogs, which includes the existing member state data. We are implementing the 5-star model to enable some variation of a common data model, a more flexible version. And finally, we will continue to use DCAT and GeoDCAT for catalog communications. Value-added services, we've been talking about semantic interoperability. We've specifically been talking about the need to uplift semantic status, add a star. So you might need transformation capabilities. Thorsten mentioned the challenge, the balance between providers and users. Many providers will say, look, I can't transform my data to your format. So we need to allow the users to access the transformation services in order to make those conversions. In addition, there's secure processing, a lot of restricted data. Often the only way to enable some sort of sharing for that or reuse of that is the use of a secure processing environment. This is not just a health requirement. It involves endangered species. It involves critical infrastructure, which is covered under NIS2. So if you have information about a power plant that is dependent on the water level of a nearby lake or river, and all of a sudden the power plant is at risk because water levels are down, that's an issue of critical infrastructure that's actually covered by NIS2. So a number of other items there. And now back to you, Thorsten.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. Now, as some of you might know, I've been working on a data space called the forest data space, which has now also become part of SAGE as one of the use cases. And now, obviously, I'm wondering, okay, how will I actually get supported with making the forest data space grow a little bit, ideally to all of Europe? Let's set the stage very briefly. So in SAGE, use case 1 is the forest transformation use case. That means we are looking at how to make both operational and strategic decisions in the forest more effectively based on data. An important strategic decision nowadays is how to adapt the species, the composition of the forest, basically to the rapidly changing climate and other conditions. And there's a lot of actors involved with that. So you have basically all the classical groups, like you have the data holders and data providers, such as forest research orgs, but also the larger forest management companies. You have facilitators, i.e. organizations that want something to change, that act as multipliers. And for example, environmental agencies are currently supporting these kind of activities because they are saying we want to have forests that are more resilient, that have higher biodiversity, etc. We have added value service providers, like a whole ecosystem of companies that provide, for example, harvesting, logistics, etc. Around the forest. And we, of course, have the actual end users, the forest owners, private, public, etc. And all of these have different things that they're expecting to get out of the ecosystem. So that's, again, this balancing thing. Yeah? None of these groups can just say, okay, we have to do everything, but everybody else gets the benefit. So for example, for the users of the system, they do pay because they see some operational and strategical benefit out of the data and the tools that are built on the data that they get. Like, for example, continuously updated recommendations, what to do, basically. The facilitators, in many cases, pay for data access and basic platform operations because they want maximum impact. And they really see, okay, there is something happening that's in our sense that matches the policy goals that we have, so we are supporting that. Concrete example, in Germany, about 300 million are spent every year on concrete forest transformation programs, and if you want to see if they are used efficiently, you need something like this. Yeah, and now, of course, the question is, given such a multi-stakeholder system that's already starting to be established, how can SAGE provide what this use case needs? And for that, I'm handing back to Mark to tell me a little bit about how the things that we would need are going to be provided.
Okay, am I live? Okay, good. So very quickly, so this is a summary. So I've talked about access to various kinds of data, and this is how we'll enrich the experience of Wetransform and the use case more broadly in terms of access to different kinds of data. We are developing a trust infrastructure to allow for that governance interoperability. This allows for not only data sovereignty, but also the possibility of monetization and some kind of payment structure, as well as clearinghouse for that. We create a structure that allows for the balancing of responsibilities. We can have service providers who can bring in some kinds of requirements, as well as use cases who can come to the table and say, we need to do certain things. How do we get access to certain kinds of infrastructure? HPC, for example, Euro HPC. How do we get access to that to do our calculations? And then in establishing a baseline for interoperability. So something that is flexible, something that can adapt to the needs of the different kinds of communities that we have, while at the same time being controlled and structured. So that it's not the Wild West. It's not, okay, well, what can I find on Google? What can I find even on Croissant? You know, these are the kinds of things that will allow you to help structure that information. So that's our objective there. Is that the last slide?
Pardon, that was the last slide, yeah? Which means... Ah, no, there was one more, sorry. So just a friendly reminder to everybody. We thought we'll conclude with a statement that we really want to move interoperability forward, and we know it's not easy. I mean, I've been in that space for more than 20 years by now, but I'm still highly motivated to keep hacking at it, so you could say. So, yeah, that means we're done for now.
Here ends the lesson. Thank you.
Before going to the panel, perhaps we have a few questions. I always have one while waiting for others. Mark, you were mentioning briefly about restricted data, and restricted data, yes. And as George mentioned, I couldn't mention because my slides were missing, but we are working on a research regarding restricted data. So you briefly mentioned it, but what type of restricted data do you sort of handle, and how do you handle them in an interoperable way between systems that might not necessarily interpret the restriction in similar ways?
Well, that's a good question, because one of the things we're working on is to create a common vocabulary for expressing these kinds of restrictions. So to establish a bit of a common understanding about what these different words mean so that there can be communication back and forth. Often, many systems are structured to say, oh, well, it's very sensitive, it's kind of sensitive, it's fully open, and these are words that don't mean anything. Instead, they have translation in the particular domain to certain technical and operational measures. These are the words that you find in the regulations that you must have in place to assure the right kind of security. So we're stepping away from these categories and simply saying, well, which technical and operational measures are required at different levels? GDPR is one thing, endangered species is another thing, NIS2, sensitive critical infrastructure is another thing. These all have requirements like that that are buried in the rules, but we want to sort of expose those and make them a way that users can decide how they want their data accessed, what requirements they place on users for reuse, etc. So that's our objective.
And maybe just to add one comment to that. So basically, for me, data spaces are all about making the intersection between the data protection needs and the potential as large as possible. So it's really important to think about the potentials and how not to limit them too much. So yes, data is sensitive, but in our experience, there's also a lot of measures that are taken that are not at all effective at addressing the actual problems that there are with working with sensitive data.
Thank you. We have a question from the audience.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for a very interesting presentation. It's a very, indeed, complex topic. When it comes to the sources that you've been tapping on, European Environment Agency, I presume, is one of the main institutions. But you've also been tapping on the sources from the so-called European Topical Centers, or TEN centers as well, that environment agencies collaborating with research institutions and academics. And I'm wondering, in the context of your project and SAGE project, how many sources, that you've been, because 10 use cases will be defined, but how many you've identified? Very pragmatic question.
Sure. So a couple of ways to answer that question. The first is, the predecessor project, the preparatory action for SAGE, was called GREAT. And that project actually identified 500 data services that were identified as high value, high priority services to be included in the Green Deal data space. Also another 100 data sets. So data services like an API or other kind of web-enabled access points. So 600 different sources from quite a number of different providers. So that was identified in advance. Now we have 10 use cases that are themselves saying, what information do we need to achieve our results? And as Thorsten just mentioned, soil and climate data are ones that are needed by UC1, the forestry use case. Other use cases have their own needs. Some of them are doing what I call a big pile of data project, where they're bringing a lot of stuff together, they're harmonizing it and creating a new data product, such as an environmental hazards exposure database available through a data space. So a lot of different variations. So that may expand that list. And finally, this is an open, we would have an open onboarding mechanism that will allow people to bring data in as desired and as needed. If there's an open API, you don't need to ask for it. You can just reach out to it, comply. We're looking at ways to create some sort of API gateway or API conversions to allow for common access methods to potentially hundreds of different sources.
Thank you. There is another question on the other side.
Hi there. It's Adam Millwood from Metadata-X. Thank you for the presentation. I thought it sounded like a really, really sensible approach. I guess my question is about impact and data usage. How are you tracking the usage of those data sets? And do you have a view of which data products are providing the most value for the community?
So from a design standpoint, there's an explicit capability for monitoring and observability. We will be instrumenting the full data flow within SAGE. Some of it will be private data that will not be shared, but it'll be data that we will use to monitor not only regulatory compliance, but also the opportunities for sustainability and value creation. That's exactly the point. We can't predict what data products are going to be valuable. We do need to have mechanisms for monetization and value creation, not necessarily through the payment of money, but through other kinds of value sharing mechanisms.
Every use case will have its own area, but the interesting thing is that of our 10 use cases, all of them have identified data products that they will create and data services that will create that value. So we have that, you know, the flywheel is starting to turn, exactly, but we hope that we must, we're required under Commission rules to be sustainable. So there it'll happen. That was easy.
Maybe add perspective from a concrete use case. So what we did for the forest transformation case was really look at basically all the core business processes of the different actor groups that are currently inefficient and where there is really high potential by making data more accessible. And especially those data that support multiple processes are the ones that are going to be high impact. With some things we already observed that from the work that we've done before. And now basically, I think we have a good framework in place, both technically, but also really from a business perspective to measure the right thing and then, really make sure that the ecosystem is actually working. Because in the end, that's one of the three main things for me in a data ecosystem. It will only work if it's actually not focused on a single dimension of data reuse, but rather on making sure that the same bit of data is, for example, used in many processes. So it's both used in your operational decision making, it's used in strategic information, it's used for compliance reporting. So always make sure that you think of all the potential users, basically.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mark, Thorsten, for the questions. Please stay on stage. We are starting with the panel. So please have a seat, and I welcome Savvas from BBDVA, representing DSSC, Valentina, DG CNECT, obviously talking about Simpl, David from DG Grow, represented PPDS. Yes. Either you get the mic or the hand mic. And obviously Nuno, health data, perfect, you already mic, from DG SANTE. I'm thinking, where can I position myself so that the audience actually can see? I'm going to be here. Thomas, if you can also help me out looking for people, with questions. I'll kick off. I'm going to move this one a little bit. So that people can see everyone. Okay. Very good. And you can still see the logo. Fantastic. Okay. So let's start with the first question. And I don't have anyone in mind. I think it's more for everybody. So perhaps we can start with David that is there. So if we're looking at a European Common Data Space today, specifically, you can start from yours. How really mature we are, and what are the main technical hurdles that we need to overcome in order to become more interoperable?
Well, that's a good question. How to become more interoperable? I think we are coming from a world that is made of silos of data. We are trying to push countries to share the data in a specific way. So we know that the change management is something complicated, and as much as you are a big organization, more difficult. If it is public sector, even more difficult, right? So I think that the first step is to have a regulation that encourages, in this case, member states, at least is the use case that I'm working on, right, to share the data in a specific way. I think we need to give them first the tools to know how to make the data more interoperable, and then also to specify the rules to make it. For example, I mentioned before the case of the European Railway Agency is a good use case, right? They were working with many silos, different data models for the railway, and eventually they created the new regulation and they have to use this ontology. I think, at least for the public sector, could be a good starting point.
Thank you. Nuno?
Yeah, well, to assess maturity is not an easy task, for sure. We can say that in our cases, so we will have to have 28 data spaces per member state at least. Per member state, no, for all member states, 28 minimum. I think that guaranteeing the technical specifications, the implementing acts for the secure processing environments, for the deployment and installation and implementation of the data spaces. That's one of the biggest hurdles that we are going to face. In terms of maturity, we are getting there as best as we can, all of us, I think.
Valentina?
I think a bit broadly with the legislation or the latest strategies also that are put in place, we need to focus on specific sectors as well, so that to make sure that we are talking about the same elements, and also technically speaking to adopt the common standards and components and tools. I preach for my things as well.
Right, thanks. Yeah, I think for the first question, where are we? I would just say 7%. So I think it's still very, very early stage. And if I think of the vision of really having a working digital market, data market in Europe, it's still very fragmented. There's so many industries that are not digitalized at all and so on. So there's a lot to do. And if I think of really kind of this, you could say, map of opportunities, of potentials, of really scaling things and deploying them quickly, we're still quite far away. In terms of how do we actually make progress and how do we become more interoperable overall, I think for me one of the key things is really getting commitments from everybody involved, getting them to actually put skin in the game. And this does mean also public authorities, it means the Commission, etc., use the systems that you are saying that should be established. Yeah. That was, for example, one of the challenges in Inspire that was actually not really used by anybody. It was just a channel for sending out data.
Savvas, you have an overview, right?
Well,
you should be,
yeah, bringing the voice of the DSCC, I could say a few things around the ecosystem. Well, I think that we are evolving. We are evolving somehow as a community. In the first years that I mentioned also in my presentation, the DSCC started at the end of 2022 in parallel with some of the preparatory also initiatives in different sectors. Most of the discussions were revolving around technology at that point in time and how this could be technically feasible. And I think that steadily we are progressing now to a point that technical aspects have been progressing a lot. And now the community is a little bit now diverting and focusing now on governance aspects, business aspects, and value for the uptake, for the adoption of data spaces in the wider community. So I think that we are evolving. Of course, in different sectors, data spaces have their different, if I can say, pace. Some might be a little bit more evolved because the timelines of this common European data space might have started a little bit earlier. Some are evolving right now. But I think that overall as a community, we are evolving. We are in this stage that we are progressing now, looking more to the business and governance aspects. In the DSCC, we are doing a lot of work. We have also a maturity model for the common European data spaces that now this is part of the standardization work of JDC 25. We are doing a lot of activities also connected to the interoperability aspect. We have been driving an interoperability pilot that soon more information will be out. And also we're collaborating with the wider community, of course, with DigiDigi. I think that this collaboration needs to evolve. We had a lot of alignment things, but I think in the future we need to do also more together with the whole community.
Thank you. Mark, from your conversation, it sounds like Sage is mature, is flying, is working.
Oh yeah, we've done nothing. But we do have very aggressive and high ambitions, so it is a challenge. Maturity for us, we're in fact still waiting for the capabilities from a technical standpoint. People have an idea of what is necessary that doesn't exist. So that, for example, the connectors. People talk about the Eclipse data space connector. These do exist, but they're currently working on, the Eclipse data space working group is currently working on configurable specifications for data rights profiles that would address access rights, as well as decentralized claims profiles, which would allow for interoperability and communication and transfer of some of these claims and attestations that exist in the world, in the real world, that we want to use in the data space to help ensure data sovereignty. So these are the kinds of things that are still ongoing. We need connectors that can be used by SMEs. Not everybody is a big company. In fact, almost everybody isn't. All in the EU, we've got 30 million enterprises and 29.5 million of them are smaller. So we need to be able to accommodate that. We need to make it easier for these organizations to participate. They can't be burdened with necessarily with high expectations in terms of what their data looks like, what formats they use. Many cases, they're going to be 2 or 3 person companies with interesting data who want to access data, and yet they have to have an ability to interact and not be limited by a complicated system. So that's what we're trying to achieve. Wish us luck.
But you make a good point. I mean, we need to help the community at large actually to access this ecosystem, and we are focusing very much on the common European data spaces rather than open up. I wouldn't say rather than. Perhaps we are still in the experimentation phase, and we want to make sure that we are doing the right thing. Nevertheless, we need to embrace the wider audience in a sense. I would like to continue perhaps with Valentina and Simpl specifically. How does Simpl, do you think, is going to help the cross-border and cross-sector data exchange?
Well, I would say also taking the points of Mark, Simpl being modular and also being the, let's say, backbone, ideally, of all the common European data spaces, and again, being able to adapt to different level of maturities. So for the more advanced, it's more really the capability to interconnect with other data spaces. For the less mature, would be also to manage the business processes internally into the data space. So this is by default helping and enabling to speak the same language and to be able to interconnect sectors, countries, and also private sector with public sector, because of course we, as an open source, it's available for anyone, and to connect, not only, of course, essentially in Europe, but also more broadly.
Thank you. Let's go to user adoption, and then perhaps, Nuno, you can be the first this time. So what are the practical barriers that you're facing in terms of user adoptions, and what do you do in order to overcome those barriers?
So regarding user adoption, our main barrier is discoverability of the data sets, and this is why Health DCAT has also come into play. So we define the standard, and we extend that application profile to Health to help in a catalog of millions of data sets to help the users track and discover the information and the data that's available on the data holders that might be interesting for them to pursue. So that would be our main barrier.
Yes. David?
In terms of barrier, I think the first reason is a bit why someone is going to invest resources in something that doesn't bring value for them. As example is the procurement data, right? Is okay. Why, as a member state, I'm going to invest more resources to improve my data quality, to improve my interoperability? Is why, right? They don't have any incentive, right? So in somehow, that's why I believe in some cases where they don't have any kind of incentive, it's important to have some enforcement for those cases. In fact, there are some cases that they already did. For example, I think it's called CRS, that is the Common Reporting Standard, has been demonstrated very useful for money laundering or for to chase people who is trying to hide tax, right? Governments, they have an incentive for that. However, for public procurement, if you share data and you have a bad data quality, it's like you don't want that people point you with the finger like you have to improve, right? So I think the only way to improve this part is if you don't have an incentive, you need some kind of enforcement.
But certainly data quality should be an incentive enough. Everybody within the member states and within the data space will want to handle good data. So if the Commission somehow, through common data spaces or through other initiatives, put an hands forward and says, let's work towards quality, that should be an incentive enough, or not necessarily?
No, imagine you are a member state, and from PPDs, we'll tell you, your data quality is bad, right? it's like you think, okay, now I need to send to launch a procurement process to hire a company to clean my data, to clean my process. I had to invest data from a budget that I didn't expect, right? So I think there is a lack of incentive on that way. So something that we are doing to change this is to point, let's say, we prepare a report about your data quality. So in Soho, you need to try to shame a bit to say, you are the worst one in the European Union, right? So you need to improve. Something like that. Because otherwise, why are the member states to invest money on that, right? Even sometimes we find patterns that is very bad. For example, for the value price, 6666, 99999, it's obvious that this data is fake. Perhaps they try to match the data quality completeness, but with fake data. That's also very bad, right? So we need to find a way to enforce a bit and also to make them in a volunteer way to improve.
Yes, but between carrot and stick, obviously the carrot is better than the stick, but perhaps we haven't found the right way to incentivize. Thorsten, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to pick up on the last word that you used. So for me, there are two ways. So the first way is currently what we see is that we are trying to reduce obligations, but at the same time we're not establishing incentives, and that often means that there is some form of gap. So I mean, I've talked to organizations all day long, and it's basically like, why should I do that? And incentives can be a helpful thing to trigger thinking in the direction of contributing to a digital ecosystem, for example. As an example, access to certain funding programs could only be possible if you actually share data on your forest through an intermediary or data space. The other thing is, and there I'm picking up what was said before very briefly, if you can't clearly articulate the value of why you're creating that to these stakeholders, they just won't care. So, I mean, I can go to some forest owner who owns 500 hectares of forest and tell them about data spaces, and they'll be like, yeah, okay. But if I can tell them, well, there are much better tools that you can use in there that enable you to optimize your operations, so you'll save 10% annually, and also help you make the right decisions for the long-term operations, because forestry people have to think about 50, 80, 100-year time cycles. Then that's a clear value proposition, and that's what we need to articulate. And the data space thing is something that happens behind the scenes, more or less.
So do you think there is the data space responsibility to evangelize and put the good words forward, and not necessarily the Commission, or should be the Commission more involved in this process?
To some degree, both is true. I like to compare that to infrastructure. I mean, infrastructure is something that everybody uses, like the roads that we're driving on. But at the same time, the investment into the infrastructure has to come at least, or let's say the impulse has to come at least in part from a more centralized place if we actually want this to become efficient and scalable, especially in the environmental sector, because let's be honest, without any environmental regulations, etc., not much is going to happen. And one way to think about it is, for example, that in future regulation or amendments to regulation, you could basically say, okay, and by the way, the reporting needs to happen through a structure such as the Green Deal data space, yeah, whatever that might look like.
As Green Deal works very much with Sage, I'll skip you for 1 second. Savvas, give me a minute. I would like to hear from Mark if he wants to add anything on this particular topic.
Just quickly. The idea of user adoption is the question. So the first is making it easy for people. I've mentioned that. One thing to keep in mind is usually when people are sharing data and doing something, they're working together they sit around the conference room table and they say, hey, it'd be great if we shared some data and did some things. So we want to enable that kind of activity within the Green Deal data space, within Sage directly. And that's what we're attempting to do. So there's no exchange of money. People don't know if it's going to be worth doing, but they hope that there will be value. We also have data-driven companies like Wetransform and many others who are saying, look, if you participate with us, we're giving you value added. We're creating value for you. So we want to enable that within Sage. Thirdly, we want to be able to engage the public authorities, including the Commission, not only because they are important players in the data ecosystem, they receive reports, they receive all of this information. So if this were happening as as Thorsten just mentioned, through a data space, all of a sudden you're starting that flywheel to turn, the virtuous cycle of data providing, data sharing, data value added, et cetera. The other thing is that it creates trust. If the Commission is using it, if member states are using it, it's an expression of trust. There's a good example of this, and that's in Estonia, where they came up with X-Road. The Estonian government said, we're going to use this for your tax returns. So guess what? People started to say, yeah, X-Road must be okay because we're reporting to the government about the taxes we owe. So it's a natural thing. So they established that trust equation from the very beginning. And I'm a little bit worried that we're trying to, reinvent the wheel and push a rock up the hill at the same time with the way we're approaching it in data spaces. And I do think that the public authorities can help a bit by saying, yes, we want to use it for some of our critical processes, and we're going to work to make the trust happen to our needs. That would be a good thing.
Point noted. Yes.
If anybody's here from the Commission.
So Savvas, let me revert the same question, but on a slightly different, let's say, perspective. What does the DSSC do in order to facilitate this process? Does the DSSC help or try to help users on board?
We hope. Of course, the DSSC has been creating over the last 3 years a set of assets. We presented this before. Ultimately, all these things are here in order to facilitate the adoption of data spaces. I mean, some of the assets, of course, are more connected to the designers of data spaces, but we have a lot of things also for enabling and facilitating the onboarding of data spaces. We have in the building blocks of the blueprint, we have a participation management building block that creates here a lot of, that includes here a lot of information about onboarding, offboarding participants, their role. All these aspects are very well documented in the form of guidelines in the specific building block. I could also stress out the toolbox has been presented by Jelte. It includes a lot of practical tools that support the uptake of data spaces because they bring functionalities, important functionalities for like participant agents, also value-adding services. All of these things are here in order to lower barriers for adoption. More things from the DSSC side that I would like to stress out. Of course, the whole discussion is a very hot topic now in the whole community, adoption and uptake. And we have the Data Spaces Symposium coming up on February the 10th and 11th in Madrid. So all of you are very welcome to be here. It's a very important event for the data spaces community that we're having here, and important somehow aspects and themes in the Data Spaces Symposium will be the uptake, the adoption and impact. So as you can understand, the whole community is now working on this topic. And because of that, and this is my last remark, we have been driving a collaborative paper in the DSCC around participant adoption and sustainability in data spaces, and Mark has been also contributing to this. This will be out soon, publicly available soon. It includes a lot of insights and reflections from the whole community around important challenges, barriers, but also potential solutions that, again, somehow lower barriers for adoption, and I would like to stress this out as well.
Very good. Let's stay with you, and let's talk about AI now. Okay. How does the foundational model, AI agent, connect, or should connect, or will they be able to connect to the data spaces, and how this connects to the AI factories and data labs? There's a lot going on in this.
Well,
tell us your point of view.
I think there is a bidirectional connection in this, the topic of AI data spaces. Of course, there is data spaces for AI, and also Alex has been presenting many things around this, how data spaces contribute to AI because they offer the foundations for even quality data sharing, for industrial data sharing, I mean, the use of restricted data for building AI solutions, for regulatory compliance. These aspects are, of course, data spaces could offer these foundations, but of course, AI for data spaces. And here we can see, for example, AI training chatbots, or there has been a lot of discussions around enabling semantic interoperability through AI. So, of course, bidirectional exchange and interconnection, we foresee this happening. Now, with AI factories and the data labs, of course, this is an ongoing discussion, I guess. A lot of things need to be discussed in the future. Also within the context of the DSCC here. If I bring also briefly my hat of BDVA, BDVA is also working a lot on these topics, and because of the fact that we are also contributing in the data in the value creation services building block, a lot of things will be reflected there in the blueprint of the DSCC as well. So again, it's an ongoing discussion that we think that would evolve fast in the next period, but definitely it's something very interconnected.
Before going to the common data space, I'll ask the same question to Simpl. How do you work with AI?
I think I mentioned that already in the presentation. So we are taking into consideration, of course, the guidelines and the strategies that were set in the AI Continent Plan and the Data Union Strategy as well, and specifically working on this to enable good quality of data and for the AI. So basically developing really these capacities and the access to AI services and machine learning and HPC as well, Euro HPC, so that the data can feed that. So.
Thank you. And the same question to the data spaces. Oh, yes, Thorsten.
Yeah, just maybe couple of thoughts on this whole topic. Yes. So one thing is, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but there's a so-called biodiversity data gap. So there's a lot of use cases around like recognizing trait of endangered species and so on, which are currently simply not easily possible because there's not enough data. And obviously the data spaces would provide an opportunity to systematically collect the relevant data and share it. So at least for our domain, I think it would be a really, really important step forward to finally address this data gap. The other thing that I'm personally involved with a lot is using AI for data harmonization itself. So that's something that has been my research interest for 15 plus years. And in the last 3 years, there were some major steps forward made, but it's also not yet easy. So interestingly enough, for example, the accuracy of the models has been going down in the last year or so because they've been focusing other things. So it's not an easy task for the machine as it is not an easy task for humans. But on the other hand, it's also clear that, for example, if we start from a 5 or 6 star model, i.e. we accept some level, so to speak, that the system should automatically do, and we have some basic annotations available, then it's absolutely feasible to perform a lot of the, let's say, very annoying work of creating the data, creating the interoperable data.
Thank you. I would like to hear, does any of you use any AI module to facilitate transforming data, harmonizing data in your data space?
Currently, for the PPDS, no. No, we plan to provide some services based in AI, like for example, using all the data that we have as a context to answer specific questions, and also to use it to analyze patterns that can be fraud. But for the transformation and so on, right now is not the case. And honestly, right now, I don't trust too much to using AI for these kind of things.
Fair enough. Nuno?
Also currently, no. Thinking about it for sure. I think it touches the previous question of user adoption. We would like to, the next steps of the dataset assistant would be that the dataset assistant was some kind of AI model that would be able to build datasets from the health data existing on the data holders. So that would give them the tools to actually provide high quality datasets that could be uploaded to the health data at use central platform and get rid of the manual labor of going through, decades of health data that has been stored in large data facilities and actually compile everything and create high quality data sets. At the same time, to be able to help the users that navigate to the central platform to actually find the data sets that are relevant to them by using AI to go over the million of data sets that could be eventually hosted on the central platform. So currently, no, but we have prospects or ideas that we would like to maybe bring to light someday.
Same question for Green Deal and Sage.
So yes, so the answer is no, but The but is important because it's not, as you may have noticed on one of my slides, data spaces don't do processing and don't do storage. So the processing and, for example, the implementation and running of AI models is something that needs to happen somewhere else. So we are working with Blue Cloud, with Destination Earth. These are digital twins of the oceans and the Earth, respectively. We have lots of interactions with the research community working in the world of climate change and environmental data. And they have many, many AI models. So we will be working with the academic research community. We also want to create mechanisms that allow them to tap into other HPC resources to run their models on a production scale. So our job is not to create AI models to solve particular problems, but they are all over the place. So we want to enable them and support that. And specifically, if I can change the topic a little bit, we want to leverage the AI factories. We're talking with them now already. And in particular, now that the data union strategy is out again, there was an earlier notice or consultation about it, we believe the data labs are very important, and we have a specific idea of how our data space can interact with the AI factories through the data labs to provide the storage capability, to provide a place for people to store the large amounts of data that they would not normally have a place in their own facility, in their own infrastructure to store. So that's a great synergistic opportunity, and as a data space, we can bring in the data sovereignty piece on top of that. The challenge is, in AI models, in the AI factory, there aren't any well-accepted mechanisms that allow for data use restrictions to be ingested by the AI model and respected by the results. That's something that's a problem with AI models today, is how this data, how these rules are combined to produce trained models that respect those rules.
That would have been my next question, follow-up question on basically on you. I mean, there is not really, it's not really clear how we can move restricted data to a data labs and then to an.
Well, it would have to be the allowances would have to be, you know, the rules or the access rights would have to be set up by data holders or providers to enable that. So we need to give them incentives. So one quid pro quo might be, you have a large data set, we will store it for you in a data lab in exchange for you making it available in a certain way with some guarantees. So there may be some, they could relax the controls in a way that would say, well, I have a place to store my data, and now I'm going to contribute to the public good in this way. So that's one value proposition that might work.
Okay, I've been told that I need to wrap up, so I will ask the last question, but it's going to be around for everyone. Okay, so beyond the topics that we have discussed, and we discussed compliance, technical hurdles, AI, are there any other pressing issue that we should tackle in order to have long-term sustainability?
It's for me?
Yeah, we'll start from you.
Sustainability of the data space, it's our job, it's our mandate to figure out a sustainability model for SAGE, for the Green Deal data space. Realistically, a lot of our outputs are public good outputs. So there's an argument for the public to pay for those. It's not exclusive. We're trying to focus on the ones that offer a value proposition to individual organization and individuals. But by definition, there is a lot of public good as well as engagement with citizen science that is not paid for. So how do we enable that? So there is an argument for that and a problem of sustainability. You saw it in the Digital Europe Work Program for 2026-27, where they're helping out a variety of data spaces with their sustainability. I just put that on the table.
Thank you very much. Savvas?
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to bring up the need also to foresee somehow interconnection with some efforts taking place at national level, because I think that there are also very important efforts taking place in different member states that, of course, the common European data spaces need to also consider, because at the same time we need to build bridges between the whole community and the whole ecosystem. Otherwise, all these efforts might not be able to be connected to the larger picture, if I can say. Again, wanted to say that we are having also in the DSCC paper around participation sustainability that is coming up, connected to the topic that you mentioned. And something that I finally forgot to the previous question, but don't want to lose the opportunity, is that last year we produced another paper with the whole community on Gen AI and data spaces, more on this connection. So we wanted to wrap up with this.
Thank you. Yeah. Thorsten, from the private sector perspective, what should happen for long-term sustainability?
So from my perspective, there are two paths. So one thing is that there is a lot of rules out there already that establish some foundation for interoperability, and we're kind of now in a phase where we say, okay, let's remove the rules. But I would really recommend not just to remove them, create something that's kind of an incentive structure or another thing that kind of shows a path forward. Not just we're not doing that anymore, but rather where do we want to go? I think that was the original ambition in the Green Data for All, for example. I'd just like to ask to pick that up again. The other thing is in terms of actually contributing to interoperability, yeah, it's the same as always. Get together, accept compromise, etc. There's nothing that can be done to make that super fast, unfortunately. But there's lots of ways that we can make the actual process more efficient. And if you want to discuss these, I'm here all day. So.
Thank you very much, Valentina.
I think for the sustainability, we're talking about economic sustainability of the data spaces. So this is crucial, and it depends on the business model of the data space. And of course, on Simpl, I would say it's more the fact of providing or helping with integrated solution that is behind the data spaces to enable, to facilitate actually this setup, but also the business, well, have a technical implementation of the business model behind. So with, for instance, the monetization of the data intermediary or governance authority, that's also part of it.
Specifically for Simpl,
yes.
I hope I have another 2 minutes, but specifically for Simpl. So what is the plan? I mean, who's going to manage Simpl?
So that's why it's an open source project. So yes. the idea is, of course, the kickstart of is done by the Commission because it's also to reuse what is existing, but also develop what is not existing. So to fill the gaps that are still at the moment, and to have an integrated solution so that you don't have to pick and choose the components like this. And then, being open source, the idea is to have a community that is maintaining and contributing primarily to the maintenance of Simpl. Of course, we need to see a bit, so first to have this first backbone, let's say, ready, and then
build
seeing a bit further. So,
of course.
I feel here.
Nuno. Yeah, very much aligned. So also a big concern on the open source availability of the solution, since all the member states will have to implement something similar than what we have on the actually similar or exactly the same if they want to on their infrastructure. So it was about engaging the IT community via these kind of open source solutions, guaranteeing that the licensing would allow them to deploy, install, change, do whatever they want on their infrastructure, and guaranteeing that future solutions, new implementations, onboarding new technologies will also be supported by the technologies and by the users of the solution. So that's one of our concerns regarding sustainability.
Thank you. Skip.
Okay, I think I have a different point of view, because we are discussing a lot about the implementation of the data spaces. But from my point of view, to be successful with data spaces and sustainable, there are two keys. The first one is the data quality, because if people don't trust in data, they will not use data spaces. And the second point, data has to be very easy to be consumed, because if people don't understand how to access the data, how to consume the data, how to bring value with data, nobody will use it. So perhaps we can have some data spaces that are technically or perfectly implemented, but if nobody uses it, it's not worth it. And to me, this is the most important thing.
Thank you very much. And with this, please.
No, I think for this, I would say the latest strategy is also focusing on specific sectors to allow this and to streamline a bit the effort, so not to have like,
Yeah, in the case of Simpl, it's more infrastructure, it's more
not for Simpl. I mean, the data union strategy is also focusing on some sectors so that you can not have a scattered landscape, and the idea is to kind of streamline, I would say.
Thank you. And with this note, I would like to thank you, the panelists, and obviously all of you, of the participants and those that follows us online. And thank you for your patience and the initial hiccup that we had. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.